Hey guys, just want to say thanks for tuning in today. Smash that subscribe button if you're new here, and as always, please like this video if you enjoy the stories. Now, let's get into the stories.
I almost didn't go. That's the honest hook. It was one of those nights where the app felt like a joke again, faces blurring together. Bio was something copied, my phone heating up from scrolling too long while I lay on my bed in my tiny live space above a closed laundromat. Then she matched with me, and everything about it felt off in a way I couldn't explain. Her profile barely had anything. No bio, just a couple pics that looked like they were taken on an old phone. She didn't let me pick anything. She insisted on choosing the restaurant and said it mattered. That alone should have been enough to bail, but I didn't. Curiosity won, or boredom, or maybe I just wanted a story to tell later. The restaurant was across town, not in a busy area either. It sat on a corner where the streetlights flickered and the sidewalks were cracked and uneven. I read online reviews before heading out, and they were weirdly mixed. Some people talked about great food like it was the best thing they ever had. Others said the place felt empty even when it wasn't, and a few reviews stopped mid-sentence like the person forgot what they were doing. I laughed it off and drove anyway, telling myself I needed to get out more. Parking was easy, which already felt wrong for a Friday night. When I walked up to the entrance, I noticed how clean the windows were, but how dim it looked inside. Not cozy dim, more like the lights were tired. I pushed the door open, and that little bell rang, echoing longer than it should have. I stood there for a second, waiting for someone to look up or say something, but nothing happened. I could see staff moving around, setting plates, wiping counters, doing their jobs like normal, just not acknowledging me at all. Then I saw her. She was already sitting at a booth near the back, hands folded on the table like she'd been waiting a long time. She looked exactly like her photos, maybe a little paler in person, like she hadn't been outside much. She smiled when she saw me, and I remember feeling relieved that at least she was real. I walked over and sat down across from her. Still no staff came by. No menus, no water, nothing. I didn't think much of it at first. Places get busy, staff miss things. But after a few minutes, it started to get uncomfortable. Servers walked right past our table, close enough that I could smell food on their clothes, and none of them looked at her. One of them almost bumped into her side of the booth and didn't even flinch. It was like she wasn't there. She didn't seem bothered. She just sat there, calm, looking around like this was normal. I tried to get someone's attention by leaning out of the booth, raising my hand a bit, but it was like I didn't exist either unless I moved away from her. When I stood up to flag someone down, a server immediately noticed me and asked if I needed help, eyes flicking past the booth like it was empty. I pointed back toward the table, and their face went blank for a second before they told me I could sit anywhere that was actually open. I sat back down anyway. My heart was going way too fast. I started to notice other things then. How her reflection didn't line up right in the window behind her. How the table felt cold under my arms like it hadn't been warmed by anyone sitting there. How the air around her smelled faintly metallic, like old pennies. She finally told me about the place, not with words, but with this heavy feeling that dropped into my chest. Images slid into my head without warning. A crowded night years ago, yelling, a sudden accident near the kitchen, her being in the wrong spot at the wrong time, her not making it out. I gripped the edge of the table, trying to breathe normal, telling myself I was tired, hungry, losing it. I realized then why she insisted on choosing the restaurant. This was where she ended, and somehow I was sitting across from her like it was just another date. I got up again, shaking now, and walked straight to the counter. I asked about the woman in the back booth. The manager looked at me like I was playing a sick joke. He told me no one had been seated there in years. He told me that booth was kept closed out of respect. He didn't want to stay more, but I could see it in his eyes. Fear mixed with frustration, like he'd been asked this before and hated remembering. When I turned back toward the booth, she was still there, watching me. No anger, no sadness, just waiting. I understood then that this wasn't a coincidence. She had gone on dates before. Plenty of them. Guys who showed up, sat down, felt weird, and left. Guys who couldn't see her fully, who just felt a cold spot and blamed the place. I was different. I could see her like she was Liv. That made me special in the worst way. I walked back to the booth because I didn't know what else to do. My legs felt heavy, like the floor was pulling me down. The restaurant noise faded like someone turned the volume knob. She leaned forward slightly, and I felt this pressure in my head, memories that weren't mine trying to fit. Her loneliness was thick, years of being stuck in the same moment while the world moved on without her. I didn't stay long after that. I couldn't. I stood up, mumbled something that didn't matter, and walked out. This time, no one stopped me. The bell rang again, too loud, and the night air hit my face like a splash of water. I sat in my car for a long time before driving, hands on the wheel, staring at the dark windows of the restaurant. I unmatched her when I got home, blocked the profile, deleted the app for a while. I tried to tell myself that was the end of it, but that wasn't how it worked. She didn't need the app anymore. After that night, I started seeing her in places we never met, sitting on a bench at the bus stop when I passed by, standing across the street when I waited for the light to change, always in a distance, always looking at me like I was the only solid thing she had left. No one else ever reacted to her. People walked through her, around her, past her. I moved apartments, changed routines, avoided that side of town. It didn't matter. She followed the spaces where I could see her, but my eyes had opened a door that wouldn't close. I read forums late at night. I reading about sightings, about people who noticed things others didn't. Most stories ended with a person learning to ignore it. I couldn't. Every time I tried, the pressure in my head came back stronger. The worst part wasn't fear. It was the understanding. I knew what she wanted. Not to hurt me, not to scare me. She wanted to be seen. She wanted someone to sit with her where it all stopped. She wanted the date to finish. Last week I drove back to the restaurant. It's closed now, boarded up, a sign on the door saying renovations coming soon. She was waiting outside, smiling like she had that first night. I parked and turned the engine off. I haven't gone in yet. I'm writing this from the car, phone shaking in my hands, because I need to put it somewhere before I stand up. I don't know if I'll come back. I almost canceled because my mascara was clumpy and my phone was at 10%, and that already felt like the universe sending signals. But I went anyway because I was tired of telling my friends I was done with dating and then downloading the app again 2 days later. This guy stood out in a boring way. Normal photos, clean smile, job listed, nothing edgy or weird. His messages were calm and steady, like he had nowhere else to be. That felt comforting at the time, which is embarrassing now. We met at this bar that used to be a hardware store. Concrete floors, long wooden bar, string lights that tried too hard to make it cozy. The kind of place where you could hear every sound because nothing absorbed noise. I showed up early and picked a stool near the end so I could watch the door. I always do that. I like seeing people before they see me. It makes me feel in control, even though it never really works. He walked in exactly on time and spotted me immediately. That was the first thing that felt off. Not that he noticed me, but how his eyes locked on and never let go. No scanning the room, no quick glance away. Just straight at me the whole walk over. I told myself he was confident. I told myself I was overthinking. Once he sat down, the not blinking thing became impossible to ignore. I tried not to stare, but every time I looked up, his eyes were still wide open, focused, wet in a way that didn't dry out. I started counting in my head without meaning to. 5 seconds. 10. 20. Nothing. Not even a twitch. I felt silly for being bothered by it, like this was the kind of thing people joke about online and not something to actually worry over. The bar was busy enough that I felt safe. People laughing, glasses clinking, music humming low through speakers mounted too high. I relaxed a little. My shoulders dropped. My phone buzzed with a text from my roommate asking when I'd be home, and I told her later. I remember thinking that if this date went bad, at least I'd get a funny story out of it. As time passed, I started noticing patterns. He leaned in at the same angle every time. He nodded at the same moments. His breathing barely changed. He didn't touch his drink much, just kept his hand wrapped around the glass like it was an anchor. When I shifted on my stool, he shifted too, mirroring me a beat later. It felt like talking to a reflection that was slightly delayed. My discomfort grew slow, not sharp. It was like realizing you're getting sick not because of one big symptom, but because everything feels off by a tiny degree. The air felt thicker around us. The sounds of the bar dulled whenever I focused on his face. I tried to watch other people to ground myself, but my eyes kept sliding back to him, like there was a string pulling them. At some point, he mentioned past dates, not in a braggy way, just facts dropping into the space between us. First dates, second dates, places he liked to go. He talked about them like they were all the same person wearing different clothes. No emotion attached. I noticed he never used names in my head when I replay it later. Just shapes, outlines, erased details. I did what I always do when I get uneasy. I pulled out my phone and started pretending to scroll. I read an article without absorbing a single word. When I glanced up again, his eyes hadn't moved. No blink, no break. My skin crawled, and I hated that word because it sounded dramatic, but it fit. My body wanted to leave before my brain caught up. I excused myself to the bathroom and walked fast, not looking back. The hallway was narrow, leading past storage rooms, and a door marked basement with a keypad next to it. I had passed it without thinking when I came in. This time, I noticed it because the air around it was colder, but the bar's warmth didn't reach that far. The bathroom was occupied, so I leaned against the wall and took deep breaths, staring at my reflection in the dark mirror across from me. I told myself to finish the date politely. I told myself not to be rude. I told myself blinking habits were not a red flag. When I walked back out, I saw him still sitting there, still facing forward, like he hadn't moved an inch. Relief washed over me because at least he hadn't followed me. Then the relief curdled because part of me wondered why he didn't need to. I sat down again, and that's when my phone buzzed with a notification from the app. Not a message, a suggested safety article about meeting new people. I had never gotten one mid-date before. My stomach dropped. I clicked through out of pure instinct and scrolled too fast. My thumb stopped on a section about missing persons linked to dating apps. Faces blurred together. Dates, bars, last known locations. I didn't recognize any names, but I recognized the bar in one photo. The angle was wrong, taken from outside, but it was the same building. Same crooked sign. Same front window. My mouth went dry. I locked my phone and set it face down, my heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my ears. That's when I heard the click. It was quiet, almost polite, but it cut through the noise of the bar like a blade. The basement door behind us unlocked itself. I knew it was behind us because I felt the change in air, that cold rolling forward, brushing the back of my neck. No one else reacted. Laughter continued. Music kept playing. A server walked by carrying a tray, stepping just a little wider around the open doorway. It was always that way. I turned my head slowly, not wanting to make it obvious. The door was open now, just a crack, darkness spilling out like ink. The keypad light was green. I hadn't heard footsteps. I hadn't seen anyone go near it. When I looked back at him, something had shifted, not his expression. That stayed calm, pleasant, unchanged. It was his posture. He had leaned back slightly, giving me space, like he knew I'd noticed. Like he was waiting for me to connect things on my own. I realized then that the not blinking wasn't a quirk. It was effort, like he was concentrating hard on staying where he was, on keeping the moment steady until something else finished setting up. My legs felt weak. My hands trembled under the bar. I could smell damp concrete now, mixing with spilled beer and citrus cleaner. I stood up so fast my stool scraped loudly, finally pulling a few glances from nearby people. I grabbed my bag and stepped sideways, not toward the door, but toward the crowd. My body moved before my thoughts formed. I didn't look at him again. I didn't want whatever connection we had to tighten. As I moved, the basement door opened wider. I didn't see inside, and I didn't want to. I felt it instead, like standing too close to the edge of a pool at night. The bar felt suddenly wrong, like it had always been built around that door, everything else just decoration. I pushed through people, murmuring apologies without meaning them, and reached the front door. My hand slipped on the handle the first time. When I finally got it open, the night air slammed into me, sharp and clean. I didn't stop walking until I was half a block away. Then I ran. I didn't look back until I reached my car. The bar looked normal from the outside. Warm lights, people inside. Nothing open that shouldn't be. My phone buzzed again. A message from him. I didn't open it. I deleted the app in the parking lot with my hands still shaking. Later that night, I read local news until my eyes burned. Missing women. Last seen at bars. Dates described as charming, attentive, easy to talk to. One article mentioned a place with a basement that had been searched multiple times and found empty every time. I didn't sleep much. I kept seeing unblinking eyes every time I closed mine. I kept hearing that click. I haven't gone on a date since. I still pass that bar sometimes during the day when it looks harmless. The basement door is always closed. Sometimes I wonder if it opens on its own again when the lights get low and the music gets loud enough to cover the sound. I knew something was off before we even met, but not in a scary way. More like the kind of off you notice later and feel dumb for missing. The kind where your brain files it away as weird but not urgent. It started with how fast she matched and how quickly she wanted to meet in person. No small talk, no back and forth memes, just a time and a place like she was booking an appointment. I remember thinking it was kind of refreshing. That should tell you how tired I was of dating. I was live in a studio near the edge of town, above a nail salon that smelled like chemicals even through the floor. I worked weird hours, slept worse, and mostly ate whatever I could microwave. So when she suggested a casual place near a clinic complex, I barely noticed the location. It was one of those cafe bar hybrids that tries to feel modern with plants and concrete walls. Not romantic, not sketchy, just neutral. The kind of place you forget about immediately after leaving. I got there first and sat near the window. I like seeing outside. It helps me keep track of time. She showed up exactly when she said she would. No rushing, no checking her phone. Just walked in like she already knew the layout. She looked normal. That part still messes with me. No creepy smile, no cold eyes, nothing you could point to later and say there it was. Just normal. The questions started early, but they slid in between normal date stuff so smoothly I didn't clock them as strange at first. Stuff about where I grew up, what I did for work, whether I played sports as a kid. Then things shifted a little. Questions about injuries, about whether I'd ever broken a bone, whether I had allergies. She asked it all casually, like curiosity, like she was really interested in me as a person. I answered without thinking much. I always do. I talk when I'm nervous. The more I talked, the more specific her questions got. Surgeries, hospital visits, family medical history. She asked about my parents like she was building a chart in her head. I laughed it off once, made a joke in my head about her being a secret nurse or something. She smiled, but the questions didn't stop. The weirdest part was how she reacted to my answers. Not emotionally, but physically. Tiny nods, slight shifts in posture, like she was checking boxes. When I mentioned my blood type, which I only knew because of a college blood drive, her shoulders relaxed in a way I didn't understand at the time. It was subtle, but it stuck with me later when I replayed everything over and over. The place wasn't busy, but there were people around. Laptops open, drinks half finished, a couple on a couch pretending not to argue. I felt safe enough. I told myself no one would pull anything in a place like that. I ordered another drink even though I hadn't planned to. She didn't stop me. She watched closely though, like she was timing it. At some point, I noticed I was getting tired way faster than normal. Not drunk tired, heavy tired, like my limbs were filled with sand. I blamed the long work day, the bad sleep, the second drink. She suggested we leave soon, maybe take a short walk. I don't remember agreeing out loud, but I remember standing up and feeling the room tilt just a little. Outside, the air was cooler. The clinic buildings nearby were quiet, lights still on in some windows even though it was late. She walked close to me, close enough that I could smell something clean and sharp, like disinfectant. My head felt fuzzy. Thoughts came slow. I remember thinking I should text someone, anyone, just to say where I was. My phone felt heavy in my pocket like it belonged to someone else. The next part comes in pieces. The sidewalk under my shoes, the sound of a door opening, the brightness of white walls. I don't remember falling asleep. I don't remember deciding to go anywhere else. One moment I was walking, the next moment there was nothing. I woke up flat on my back, staring at a ceiling that hummed softly. The light was too bright, the kind that makes it hard to focus. My mouth was dry, my tongue thick. When I tried to move, my arm didn't respond the way I expected. Panic hit hard then, fast and sharp, cutting through the fog. I turned my head slowly and saw the room. It looked like a clinic room, but not one I recognized. No posters, no comforting colors. Just clean surfaces and machines that beeped quietly. There was a label on the wall across from me, printed and taped up neatly. Compatible donor. All lowercase. It took my brain a few seconds to understand what I was read. My arm was hooked up to something. Not blood going out, not yet, but something going in. Clear fluid. My other arm had a band around it, tight and uncomfortable. I tried to sit up and felt a pull in my side that made me dizzy. Someone must have anticipated that because the bed adjusted on its own, lowering me back down. She wasn't there. That part almost made it worse. The room felt organized, planned, like she had set everything in motion and stepped away. I tried to shout, but my voice came out weak and wrong. My throat felt numb. I could hear movement somewhere beyond the door, but no one came in. Time stretched in that room. I don't know how long I was there before someone finally showed up. They wore scrubs, face covered, eyes neutral. They checked the machines, adjusted something, and left without acknowledging me as a person. I was an object on a list, a match. I pieced things together slowly as my head cleared. The questions, the timing, the location near the clinics, the way she relaxed when I mentioned my blood type. This wasn't random. I wasn't special. I was suitable. Later, after more time I couldn't track, another person came in and removed the IV. They left paperwork on a tray near the bed. I couldn't move much, but I could see enough to read parts of it. Charts. Numbers. My name spelled right. Notes about compatibility and success rates. Nothing about consent. I was released in the early morning, dropped off a few blocks from where we met, wallet and phone returned neatly like borrowed items. No explanation. No threats. Just a body that felt wrong, lighter in a way that scared me. I checked myself constantly for scars, for signs what they took or planned to take later. I went to a real hospital that afternoon. Tests came back mostly normal. Mostly. No one could explain the lingering weakness, the deep ache that felt like something was missing even if it technically wasn't. I didn't tell them the whole story. I knew how it sounded. The app profile was gone. Unmatched, deleted, erased like it never existed. I tried Read forums. I reading stories from other people who woke up places they didn't agree to be. Most of them didn't end well. Some ended abruptly, accounts abandoned mid-sentence. Now I check my arm every day where the IV was. The mark faded, but the memory didn't. Sometimes I get calls from unknown numbers that hang up as soon as I answer. Sometimes I think I see her in crowds near medical buildings, watching, checking her invisible list. I don't date anymore. Not because I'm scared of people, but because I'm scared of being useful in the wrong way again. Whatever they needed from me that night, they got enough to keep my name on file. Compatible donor doesn't feel like a compliment anymore. It feels like a countdown. I didn't think it would turn into a story. That's probably the scariest part looking back. I thought it would be a forgettable night, one of those choices you barely remember except when an app asks for feedback. I had just gotten out of a boring situationship and wanted something simple, no strings, no deep talks. When he matched with me, it felt easy. Too easy, but in a way that felt lucky at the time. His profile was normal in that aggressively neutral way. Gym pics, mirror selfie, one photo with a dog that didn't look like his. His messages weren't clever, but they weren't creepy either. Straightforward, confident, like he knew what he wanted and didn't feel the need to dress it up. When he suggested hanging out at his place, I agreed faster than I probably should have. I told my roommate where I was going. That felt like enough protection back then. His apartment was in a newer building downtown, one of those glass and concrete ones that all looked the same. The lobby smelled like cleaning spray and fake plants. The elevator ride felt longer than it should have, quiet except for the hum and the numbers lighting up. I remember checking my reflection in the mirrored wall and thinking I looked tired, but good enough. When he opened the door, everything still felt fine. Clean space, neutral colors, nothing flashy. The kind of place that looked staged even when someone lived there. He stepped aside to let me in, and I noticed how quiet it was. Not cozy quiet, more like the sound was being swallowed. I brushed it off as thick walls. We walked into the living room, and that's when I noticed the frames. They were everywhere, lining the walls, sitting on shelves, even propped on the floor like he hadn't decided where to hang them yet. At first, my brain just registered them as decoration. Lots of people have photos up. Then one of them caught my eye because it felt familiar in a way that made my stomach drop. It was a woman sitting on a bus stop bench, looking off to the side. Same haircut as me, same nose, same small scar near the eyebrow that I got when I was a kid and never mentioned because it's not obvious unless you know to look. I stepped closer, telling myself it was coincidence that lots of people look alike. Then I saw another one, and another. Different settings, different clothes, different lighting. The same face, my face. Not identical like a mirror, but close enough that my chest tightened. It felt like seeing photos of myself taken by someone else, moments I didn't remember. One was at a coffee shop I go to sometimes. One was outside my old apartment building. One looked like it was taken from across the street, zoomed in slightly. I tried to keep my breathing normal. My brain scrambled for explanations that didn't involve panic. Maybe he had a type. Maybe it was projecting. Maybe stress was messing with me. I turned and looked at him, hoping to see confusion on his face, some sign that this wasn't what it looked like. He watched me calmly, like he'd have been waiting for this part. I walked along the wall slowly, pretending to admire the frames. That's when I noticed the dates. Small labels on the bottom corner of each frame. Neat handwriting. Dates written like reminders. Some were from years ago, some from months ago, and some were from days that hadn't happened yet. One frame stopped me completely. The date was 3 weeks from now. The woman in the photo was wearing an outfit I owned but hadn't worn yet. The background looked like the park near my work, the one I walk through when I'm running late. My legs felt weak. I had to lean on the back of the couch to stay upright. I wanted to ask him what this was. I wanted to hear a normal explanation so badly it hurt, but no sound came out. My throat felt tight, like my body knew something my brain was still refusing to accept. I kept looking because once you see something like that, you can't stop. There were photos of the same woman with different hair lengths, different weights, different expressions. Smiling, tired, distracted. Some looked older, lines near the eyes that I didn't have yet. One frame on the far wall showed her lying on a bed that looked exactly like the one I was standing next to. That was when the fear finally hit full force. Not a slow build, not creeping. Just instant and overwhelming. My heart slammed against my ribs and my vision narrowed. I felt like I was standing in someone else's life, one that had been planned out without me. I backed away from the wall and bumped into the coffee table. The sound was loud in the quiet apartment. He still hadn't moved. He didn't look surprised or annoyed. If anything, he looked relieved, like I had finally caught up. I noticed then how few personal items there were. No clutter. No random objects. Everything felt curated around those frames, but the apartment existed only to hold them. I glanced toward the door. It felt far away suddenly, like the room had stretched. My phone was in my bag, hanging off my shoulder. I clutched it like it was a lifeline. My thoughts raced, but they kept circling the same idea. How long had this been going on? How many versions of me existed on those walls? I moved toward the hallway, pretending I needed the bathroom. My steps felt heavy, like I was walking through water. The hallway had more frames. Smaller ones. Close-up shots. Details. Hands. The back of a neck. The curve of a shoulder that matched mine exactly. Some of them had notes on the back that I could see through the glass. Faint outlines of words pressed too hard. At the end of the hallway was the bedroom. The door was open. Inside, the bed was neatly made, stiff like it hadn't been slept in. Above the headboard were more photos arranged in a grid. These were different, darker, taken at night. Some of them showed the woman asleep. I felt dizzy. My head swam. I grabbed the doorframe to steady myself. Every instinct screamed at me to run, to get out, to not be here another second. But fear does weird things. It slows you down. It makes you question your own reactions. I turned back toward the living room, ready to leave without explaining, without caring how rude it seemed. That's when I noticed one last frame near the door. It was placed lower than the others, almost hidden. The date on it was tomorrow. The woman in the photo was standing in this same apartment near the door, hand on her bag strap, eyes wide. It was me, exactly me, wearing the clothes I had on right now. Something snapped then. Whatever part of me was trying to be polite or rational shut off completely. I moved fast, faster than I thought I could. My hand fumbled with the lock, fingers shaking so hard I almost dropped my keys. Behind me, the apartment stayed quiet. No footsteps, no rush. That made it worse. The door finally opened, and I bolted into the hallway. I didn't look back. I ran to the elevator and hit the button over and over until the doors opened. The ride down felt endless. My reflection looked wrong, like I was seeing myself from one of those frames. Outside, the night air felt unreal, too sharp, too alive. I didn't stop until I was blocks away, chest burning, legs trembling. I ducked into a convenience store and stood there pretending to browse until my hands stopped shaking. I went home and locked the door. I didn't sleep. Every sound made me jump. I checked my phone constantly, half expecting a message, half dreading it. Nothing came. The next day, his profile was gone. Not unmatched. Erased. Like it never existed. I tried to tell myself I imagined it. That stress and fear twisted my memory. But I can still see those frames when I close my eyes. The dates. The future ones. I changed my routines. I took different routes to work. I moved a few months later without telling many people. Sometimes I feel watched, like a camera lens just out of sight. Sometimes I wonder if the future photos update themselves, if there's a wall somewhere that still has my face on it, waiting for a date to catch up. The scariest part wasn't when I found out the truth. It was how good everything felt before that. How comfortable, how easy. The kind of easy that makes you stop questioning things because you finally think life is cutting you a break. I keep replaying the beginning in my head, trying to find the exact moment where I should have noticed, where I could have stepped off before everything lined up too perfectly. We matched on a dating app I barely used. I only opened it when I was bored at night, half watching videos, half scrolling like muscle memory. Her profile hit me like a mirror. Same music taste, same dumb hobbies, same jokes in her bio that I thought were kind of niche. I remember laughing and thinking there was no way this was real. People always exaggerate online, but when we started talking, it didn't fade, it locked in. She texted like me. Same pacing, same tone, even the same bad habit of overusing certain phrases I didn't realize I leaned on until I saw them coming from someone else. When we met in person, it got worse in a way I didn't have words for yet. She ordered the same food I was about to order, laughed at the exact moments I did, leaned back when I leaned back. It felt like hanging out with someone who had known me forever. At first, I loved it. I told my friends I had finally met someone who got me without effort. No awkward pauses. No explaining myself. It was like skipping the annoying parts of dating and going straight to comfort. I didn't notice how rarely she talked about herself without looping it back to me. I didn't notice how she never disagreed. I didn't notice how every story she told somehow connected to something I had already mentioned weeks earlier. We started seeing each other a lot. Too much, probably. She slid into my routine so smoothly it felt natural. Same coffee orders. Same walking routes. Same dumb shows I watched when I couldn't sleep. She knew what I was about to say before I said it. She'd smile right before a joke landed. I called it chemistry. That's what people call it when they don't want to question magic. The first crack showed up in a small way. She mentioned something about my childhood I was sure I hadn't told her. Not a big thing. Just a detail about a nickname my mom used when I was little. I paused, confused, and she brushed it off like I must have forgotten telling her. I laughed it off too. Memory is weird like that. I didn't want to be the guy who overanalyzes. But it kept happening. Comments about schools I went to. Places I used to hang out as a kid. Stories I remembered telling friends years ago, not dates. Each time she had an excuse ready. Something I could technically believe if I wanted to. And I did want to. Things shifted the night I went back to her place for the first time. Her apartment was neat, almost staged but warm. When I wandered around, I noticed a shelf of notebooks stacked carefully in a corner. Nothing strange about that. I like notebooks too. What stopped me was one sitting slightly open on top. I didn't mean to read it. My eyes just caught familiar words. My words. Phrases I used all the time, written in her handwriting. I picked it up, my chest tightening, and flipped a few pages. Dates filled the margins. Observations. Routines. Moods, my routines. My moods. I felt dizzy. My head buzzed like static. When I looked closer, some of the entries were dated from before we met. Way before. I sat down hard on the couch, notebook in my hands, trying to make it make sense. That's when I noticed the photos tucked into the back pages. Grainy pictures printed small. Me at different ages, walking to school, sitting on a curb, standing with friends I barely remembered anymore. My stomach dropped, not fear right away. Disbelief. My brain refused to connect the dots because the shape they made was too wrong. I kept digging. More notebooks, labeled by years, going back farther than I was ready for. Childhood years. Middle school, high school. Notes about things I liked, things I hated, things that made me quiet, things that made me loud. She had tracked it all. Adjusted herself slowly over time, shaping her interests, her reactions, her personality around mine. It hit me then that she wasn't mirroring me now. She always had been. I was a reference point. She was the project. Memories flooded back in a new light. Moments I thought were coincidences. Times I felt watched as a kid and brushed it off. A girl in the background of old class photos I'd never paid attention to. A familiar face that never stood out until now. I felt sick. My hands shook so bad I had to set the notebook down. Every good feeling I had with her twisted into something heavy and wrong. The comfort became a trap. The connection felt like a lie carefully built over years. When she came back into the room, she didn't look surprised. She looked relieved, like she had been waiting for me to finally catch up. Her face stayed calm, soft, familiar in the worst way. She didn't rush toward me, didn't panic. She knew me too well to do that. I backed away slowly, heart pounding, trying to keep space between us. My thoughts raced, but they all ended in the same place. This wasn't something that started on a nap. This was something that started when we were kids. She didn't fall for me. She decided on me. I left without grabbing my jacket, without explaining. I just walked out into the night and kept walking until my legs hurt. I didn't know where to go, only that I couldn't be near her. Every shadow felt wrong. Every face in passing felt like it might be hers in a different phase. When I got home, I locked the door and sat on the floor for a long time. I went through old boxes, yearbooks, photos, and there she was, always somewhere, never close enough to matter until now. I blocked her number, deleted the app, tried to erase her from my life the way she erased herself into mine. But it doesn't work like that. She knows my habits, my patterns, my favorite places. She knows how I think because she helped shape it. Sometimes I notice little changes. A song I loved suddenly feels wrong. A joke doesn't land the same. I wonder which parts of me are actually mine and which ones she studied into existence. Last week, I found a new notebook slipped under my door. No name, no note. Just my handwriting copied perfectly on the first page, dated tomorrow. I haven't opened it yet. I knew I should have said no the second he insisted on driving. Not suggested. Insisted. Like it was already decided and I was just catching up. I even had my keys in my hand, ready to joke about meeting there instead, but something about the way he said it made me tuck them back into my bag without thinking. That's how this started. Not with fear. With me letting something slide because it felt easier than pushing back. We met at a diner off the highway, one of those places that never fully updates itself. Sticky menus, cracked vinyl booths, coffee that tastes burnt no matter what time it is. He was charming in a low-effort way. Not smooth, just comfortable. The kind of guy who leans back and makes you feel like he's already decided you're fine. I remember noticing his hands. Scarred a little like he worked outdoors or fixed things. I told myself that was a good sign. I don't know why. The plan was simple. Drive out to a lookout point he said he knew, then head back before it got too late. I texted my friend the details. Took a picture of his license plate without being obvious. Did all the things you're supposed to do. I felt responsible, prepared. I didn't feel scared at all. His car smelled like pine air freshener and something metallic underneath. The seats were clean but worn like they'd seen a lot of use. I buckled in and watched the diner lights fade behind us as we pulled onto the road. Music played low. Nothing recognizable. Just noise filling space. At first, the drive was normal. 2-lane roads, dark fields on either side, the occasional house with a porch light glowing. He talked about work, about how he liked driving at night because it made him feel focused. I nodded along, watching the cups on the dashboard. The route made sense until it didn't. About 20 minutes in, the give screen flickered and recalculated. The blue line jumped off the main road and curled into a thinner gray one that I didn't recognize. I leaned closer, squinting. The name of the road sounded wrong. Not fake, just old, like it hadn't been used in a long time. He didn't question it. Didn't hesitate. Just turned when the gups told him to. I told myself apps mess up sometimes. I told myself he probably knew a shortcut. I told myself I was overthinking again. The road narrowed fast. Pavement gave way to gravel. Trees crowded in close, branches arching overhead like they were leaning in to listen. My phone lost signal. I noticed because I checked it without meaning to. No bars, no loading, just dead. The car headlights cut through the dark in a thin tunnel. Everything outside that beam disappeared completely. I felt boxed in, like the night was pressing against the windows. I tried to make a joke in my head about horror movies and bad decisions, but it didn't land. My mouth felt dry. Then I saw the first name. It was carved into the bark of a tree just off the road, caught in the edge of the headlights as we passed. Deep grooves, old and dark. A woman's name. I didn't think much of it at first. People carved names into trees all the time. Couples, war teens, hikers marking trails. It didn't mean anything on its own. Except there was another one, and another. As the car moved forward, I started noticing them everywhere. Names carved at shoulder height, some higher, some lower, all different styles. Some neat, some angry, some fresh, some worn smooth by time. All women's names. My chest tightened. I tried to track how often they appeared. Every few trees, every turn. It felt intentional, like this road was lined with them on purpose. I glanced at him, hoping to see confusion or surprise on his face. He just drove, eyes on the road, hands steady on the wheel. My heart started pounding so loud I was sure he could hear it. I told myself it was coincidence. I told myself this could be an old lover's lane or something stupid like that. Then I saw a name I recognized. It wasn't someone I knew personally. It was someone he had mentioned earlier. A story about an ex who moved away suddenly. He hadn't said her name out loud, but I had seen it flash on his phone when a notification popped up earlier in the night. The same spelling. Same unusual extra letter at the end. My stomach dropped. Cold spread through me, heavy and slow. I stared at the trees now, really looked at them, my eyes darting from trunk to trunk. More names clicked into place. Women he had mentioned casually, not all at once, but over time. Stories framed like bad luck, like things that just happened to him. The gup's voice rerouted again, calm and mechanical, telling us to continue straight. The road ahead dipped sharply, disappearing into thicker woods. I realized then how far we were from anything else. No houses, no lights, no sound but the engine and the crunch of gravel under the tires. I thought about opening the door, about jumping out while we were still moving slow. The thought flashed bright and desperate, but fear froze me. What if I broke something? What if he chased me? What if the woods were worse? I forced myself to breathe slow, to think. Panic would get me nowhere. I needed a plan. I needed time. The car slowed to a stop. My body tensed so hard it hurt. He pulled over onto a small clearing at the side of the road, headlights illuminating a cluster of trees ahead. These were different. Thicker. Older. Their bark was layered with carvings, names overlapping names. Some crossed out, some circled. I saw my name. It wasn't fresh. That was the worst part. It looked like it had been there a while. Same letters. Same little loop I used when I write my name by hand. My vision blurred. I felt detached from my body, like I was watching someone else sit there realizing something horrible. My thoughts raced backward, flipping through memories like cards. The app, the match, the way he knew certain things already, the insistence on driving. The diner off the highway like a checkpoint. This wasn't random. I hadn't stumbled into this. I had been guided. He finally looked at me then, really looked. Not smiling, not angry, just focused like he was checking if a piece fit. I could feel the weight of the moment pressing down, the air thick and hard to breathe. I don't know why I did what I did next. Instinct, maybe. Desperation. I laughed. Forced and wrong, but loud. I leaned forward and pretended to notice something on the dashboard, like I was distracted, like I hadn't seen the trees. While his attention shifted for that split second, I grabbed the door handle and threw it open. Cold air rushed in, sharp and real. I didn't think. I ran. The gravel cut into my shoes. Branches whipped my arms and face as I bolted into the woods, not caring where I went as long as it was away. I heard him shout behind me, but the sound warped in the trees, losing shape. I kept moving, lungs burning, like screaming. I tripped and fell hard, rolling down a small slope into mud and leaves. Pain flared, bright and grounding. I stayed still, pressed against the earth, heart hammering so hard I thought it would give me away. I heard footsteps nearby, slow, deliberate, circling. I held my breath until my chest ached. After what felt like forever, the sounds faded. An engine started. Headlights swept through the trees once, twice, then disappeared. I didn't move for a long time. When I finally did, the sky was lighter. Early morning creeping in. I found my way to a road, eventually dirty and shaking, and flagged down a passing truck. The driver didn't ask many questions. He just took me into town. I went to the police. I told them everything. The road, the names, my name. They took notes. They searched the area. They found the road. They found the trees. The carvings were real. Dozens of names. Some matched missing persons reports. Some didn't. They never found him. The car was gone. No GEPS data. Nothing that led anywhere solid. Sometimes I wonder if the road rerouted itself. If it only shows up when someone like me is in the passenger seat. I don't drive at night anymore. I don't let anyone insist on anything. And every time I pass a line of trees, I look away, afraid I'll see my name again, carved deeper this time. I didn't think I would ever write this down. Not because it's embarrassing, but because writing it makes it real in a way my brain keeps trying to avoid. I've told myself 100 times that if I'd but look too closely, if I'd but trace the details, maybe it will stay blurry enough to survive. That didn't work. So this is me finally laying it out from the beginning, before my memory starts rearranging things to protect me. It started on a night I already felt detached from my own life. I was live alone then, small apartment, bad sleep schedule, eating whatever was closest. Dating felt like a distraction more than anything else. When she matched with me, it felt impulsive. Fast messages, casual tone, nothing heavy. She didn't ask many questions about me. That should have stood out, but I liked it. It felt easy. We met late. Too late for coffee, too early for anything responsible. She came over instead of going out, and I remember noticing how quiet the building felt that night. Like everyone else had decided to be somewhere else. She looked different in person, but not in a way I could point to. Same face, same smile, but there was a sharpness under it, like she was always alert even when she laughed. The night itself is hazy. Not because of substances or anything dramatic. It just didn't stick in my head like normal memories do. Moments slid past each other without edges. What I do remember clearly are her hands. Her nails were longer than I expected, not flashy, just sharp enough to notice when she touched my skin. I joked about it in my head, told myself I'd probably have scratches the next day. When I woke up, the room felt wrong. Not scary yet, just off. The light coming through the blinds looked gray instead of warm. My phone said it was later than I thought. My body ached in that dull way you get after a bad night's sleep. I rolled over and saw her still there, curled toward the wall, breathing slow and deep. That's when my back started to sting. I reached back without sitting up and felt raised lines across my skin. Fresh. Sore. More than I expected. I carefully shifted and caught a glimpse of myself in the mirror across the room. The marks were angry red, cutting across my back in uneven lines. It looked like someone had dragged their nails hard, not playfully. I felt a flicker of unease, but nothing close to panic. I told myself it was just one of those things people laugh about later. I got up quietly and went to the bathroom. The mirror there was harsher, brighter. I turned my back and twisted to get a better look. That's when my stomach dropped. The marks weren't random. They curved and angled in ways that felt deliberate. Not letters yet, but close enough that my brain started trying to force patterns onto them. I shook my head and told myself to stop. Skin does weird things. Swelling changes shapes. I was tired. I splashed water on my face and leaned on the sink until my breathing slowed. When I went back into the bedroom, she hadn't moved. The same position. The same steady breathing. I stood there watching for a second longer than normal. Something about how still she was bothered me. Not dead still. Just deeply settled, like nothing could pull her out of it easily. I grabbed my phone and snapped a photo of my back using the mirror just to check later when the redness went down. I didn't tell myself why I wanted proof. I just did it. An hour passed. I made coffee, sat on the edge of the couch, scrolled without absorbing anything. My back still burned, but the pain shifted, crawling instead of aching. I went back to the bathroom and looked again. The marks had changed. Not healed, not faded, moved. The lines were thinner now, more defined. The curves sharper. My heart started racing as recognition hit in pieces, slow and horrible. I leaned closer to the mirror, my face inches from the glass, afraid to blink. They were letters. Not perfectly formed, but clear enough. 4 words stretched unevenly across my back, like someone had carved them with patience. Don't elite her sleep. I felt like the floor tilted. My knees buckled and I had to grab the counter to stay upright. My reflection looked wrong, eyes too wide, skin too pale. I turned away from the mirror and paced the bathroom, hands shaking so hard I couldn't clench them into fists. This couldn't be real. Skin doesn't do that. Scratches don't rearrange themselves into warnings. I told myself I was hallucinating, that stress and lack of sleep were messing with me. I went back and looked again anyway. The words were still there. I rushed back into the bedroom, my heart slamming against my ribs. She was still asleep. Same position. Same calm face. I stared at her like she was a stranger, like she had been placed there while I wasn't looking. My thoughts spiraled fast and messy. Who would do this? How would they do this? Why would they do this? And the worst one, why would my own body do this to me? I checked the photo on my phone from earlier. The marks were there, but not arranged. Just scratches. No message. Whatever was happening now. I backed away from the bed slowly, like she might sense movement. Every sound felt too loud. The hum of the fridge, the tick of the clock, my own breathing. Don't let her sleep. The words replayed in my head over and over, growing heavier each time. I didn't know what they meant exactly, but I knew what they implied. Something bad would happen if she stayed asleep. Something worse if she woke up wrong. I considered leaving, grabbing my keys and getting out, calling someone. Anyone. But the thought of turning my back on her, of leaving her alone in my space while those words burned into my skin, filled me with a different kind of fear, like abandoning a loaded weapon. I forced myself to think, to slow down. Panic wouldn't help. I needed to keep her awake. That was the message. Whatever else came after didn't matter yet. I sat on the edge of the bed and gently shook her shoulder. Nothing. I shook harder. Her breathing didn't change. My mouth went dry. I tried again, more force this time, calling her name in my head even though I didn't speak it out loud. Still nothing. It was like she was too far gone to reach. I noticed then how cold her skin felt under my hand. Not ice cold, just cooler than it should have been. I pulled my hand back like I'd touched something wrong. My back burned hotter, the letters tightening, itching in a way that felt almost urgent. I could feel the skin stretching, the message reinforcing itself like it didn't trust me to listen. I went to the kitchen and grabbed a glass of water. My hands sloshed it everywhere as I carried it back. I hesitated only a second before splashing it on her face. Her eyes flew open. For a split second, she looked confused. Then she smiled. It wasn't the same smile from the night before. This one felt sharp, like it had too many edges. Her eyes focused on me in a way that made my stomach twist. Awareness flooded her face all at once, like she had been pretending to sleep and finally dropped the act. I stumbled back, heart pounding. My back flared with pain, then relief like something had loosened its grip. She sat up slowly, stretching like nothing was wrong. Water dripped from her hair onto my sheets. She tilted her head at me, studying my face like she was checking a reaction. I didn't stay. Whatever was supposed to happen next, I wasn't going to be there for it. I grabbed my phone, my keys, and bolted out the door barefoot, not caring who saw me in the hallway. I drove around for hours, parked in random lots, checked my back in public bathrooms. The words faded slowly, breaking apart into meaningless lines again by afternoon. By night, they were gone completely, leaving only faint scars. She never texted, never called. Her profile vanished like she had never existed. Sometimes when I wake up too early and the room is still gray, I feel a phantom burn across my back. I wonder what would have happened if I hadn't listened. I wonder where she went when she woke up fully. And I wonder who or what carved that warning into me, and why I cared whether she slept. I didn't notice at first because night was where my life already happened. I worked late, slept late, and most of my friends were the same way. So when I met him and realized all our time together happened after sunset, it didn't stand out as strange. It felt convenient, comfortable, like we were two people who finally lined up without effort. We met online, nothing dramatic. His profile photos were all taken at night, which I thought was a vibe choice. City lights, street lamps, neon signs reflected in windows. He had a soft-looking face and eyes that always seemed a little tired in a familiar way. Our messages came late. Never mornings. Never afternoons. Always after dark when the world felt quieter and more honest. Our first date was at a 24-hour diner, then another one walking around empty streets. The nights at my place with the lights low and the windows open. He never suggested daytime plans, not even once. I joked about it in my head, like maybe he was a vampire or something, but it never felt serious. He always had a reason ready without really saying it. Work stuff, bad sleep, not a morning person. Things everyone says. He never came over before sunset, never stayed past sunrise. It was subtle. I didn't realize how strict it was until later, when I started thinking back and saw how carefully everything was timed. He also never appeared in photos. That sounds fake when I write it out, but it's true. Every time I tried to take a picture together, something went wrong. My phone died, the image blurred, his face caught in shadow. I laughed it off every time. I didn't push. I didn't want to be that person. He felt real in every other way. Warm, solid. His hand on my back when we walked. His breath against my neck when he leaned close. I could hear him laugh. I could feel the weight of him next to me. I didn't question that part because why would I? Weeks passed like that, then months. He slid into my routine so smoothly it scared me a little. But in a good way, like maybe this was what people meant when they said it just worked. I started to think about introducing him to friends, about making it official, about daylight. The first time I asked to see him during the day, everything shifted. It wasn't dramatic, no anger, no panic, just a pause. A fraction of a second where his face went still in a way I had never seen before. Then he smiled and brushed it off, and the moment passed. But it stuck with me. It sat in the back of my head like a splinter. After that, I started noticing other things. How he'd avoided windows when the sky started to lighten. How he always checked the time near the end of the night. How he left before dawn even when he clearly didn't want to. It felt less like preference and more like a rule. I told myself I was imagining patterns because I was bored, because my brain likes to make stories, but the feeling didn't go away. One night, after he left, I couldn't sleep. The apartment felt too quiet. I scrolled through my phone and ended up going down a rabbit hole I didn't mean to fall into. Old local news. Stuff I read years ago and forgot. I don't know what made me search the neighborhood name plus night. Maybe nothing. Maybe something I didn't want to admit. That's when I saw the photo. It was a crime scene image from 10 years ago. Grainy. Taken at night. Police tape. Flashing lights frozen mid-spin. A small crowd blurred in the background. I almost scrolled past it. Then my chest tightened. There was a man standing just outside the tape. half in shadow. Face turned slightly away from the camera. The shape of him hit me first. The posture, the tilt of the head, the way his hands hung at his sides. I zoomed in. My stomach dropped so hard I thought I might be sick. It was him. Not similar. Not close. Him, same face, same eyes, same everything. Not older. Not younger. Exactly the same as the man who had kissed me goodbye an hour earlier. I stared at the screen until my eyes burned. My brain refused to accept it. This had to be coincidence. Someone who looked like him. A trick of memory. I scrolled through more images from the same night. Different angles, different cameras. He was in all of them. Always in the background, never the focus. Always at night, always just outside the light. The article talked about a woman who had been found dead in her apartment. No suspect ever charged. Case went cold. The photos were taken outside the building. My building. I dropped my phone. Everything rushed back at once. The rules, the timing, the nights only. The way he never aged in photos because there were no photos. The way he never talked about his past unless it was vague enough to slip through. I didn't sleep. I sat on my couch until the sky started to lighten, watching the window like it might do something wrong. When the sun came up fully, my apartment felt different. Emptier, like it was meant to be seen in the dark and resented the light. He texted that night like nothing was wrong. Same tone, same warmth. Asking to come over. My hands shook as I typed back that I wanted to see him during the day, just once. No reason given, just honesty. The pause this time was longer. He didn't say no, he said later. Later was vague enough to hurt. I didn't wait. The next day, I went to the library. I don't know why there first, but I needed somewhere quiet and solid. I pulled old newspapers, archives, microfilm that smelled like dust and time. I spent hours of reading everything connected to that case, names, addresses, timelines. His name never appeared, not as a suspect, not as a witness, not anywhere official, but his face was there, always there, night after night, different years, different incidents, same background presence. I found another photo, different crime, different woman, different street, same man. By the time the sun started to set, I was numb. Fear had burned itself out, leaving something heavier behind. Understanding, maybe, or resignation. I walked home before dark. I wanted to be there when night came. I wanted answers, even if they hurt. He was already there when the streetlights came on, standing across the road like he had always been, waiting. This time, I didn't feel comfort when I saw him. I felt the weight of 10 years pressing down on my chest. The version of him I knew smiled and stepped closer, but I stayed where I was. The light from a passing car cut across his face, and for a split second, he looked like the man in the photos. Flat, distant, frozen in time. I realized then that he didn't exist at night by choice. Night was where he was allowed to exist. I don't remember going inside. I don't remember how long we stood there. I remember the sky darkening completely and how red he looked once the sun was fully gone, like the world had snapped back into place. The next morning, I woke up alone. No messages. No trace he'd been there at all. I checked the news out of habit. Another crime scene photo. Fresh. Taken at night. Police tape. Flashing lights. And in the background, just outside the frame of attention, he stood the same way he always had. I knew the date was going to be weird before it even started because my stomach wouldn't calm down, and that never happens to me. I wasn't nervous in a cute way. It felt like my body was trying to warn me and my brain kept talking over it. I had matched with her 2 days earlier, barely talked, and somehow still agreed to meet her at this old restaurant downtown that everyone says is cursed by bad luck. I laughed when my friend said that. I wasn't laughing when I pulled up. The building looked tired. Not abandoned, just worn down in a way that made it feel older than it should have been. Brick walls with cracks that had been painted over too many times. Windows slightly crooked in their frames. The sign flickered even though it wasn't windy. I remember thinking it was a strange choice for a first date, but she had picked it, and I didn't want to start things off by arguing. Inside, the place smelled like grease and sugar. The lights were low and yellow, and the tables felt too close together. I could hear every scrape of silverware, every cough, every laugh. It was busy but not lively, more like everyone was stuck there together. I found our table near the back, close to a support pillar that had a long crack running down it like a scar. She arrived right on time, calm, smiling, nothing about her looked threatening. She sat across from me and folded her hands like she was settling in for a long talk. That's when she said the thing that stuck in my head the rest of the night. Not as a joke, not dramatic, just casual. She said she could hear lies. I almost laughed. I think I did smile, but inside I rolled my eyes. I figured it was a personality quirk or some kind of test. People say weird things on first dates all the time to see how you react. I told myself not to overthink it. I nodded and moved on like it was nothing. The server came over and took our order. I told a small lie without thinking. One of those harmless ones people use to sound better. The kind you don't even count. As soon as the words left my mouth, something sharp cracked behind me, loud enough that half the room went quiet. A glass shattered at another table. No one had touched it. It just split and fell apart, spraying the floor. Everyone froze for a second, then laughed it off like accidents happen. The server rushed over to clean it up. My heart started beating faster. Coincidence, I told myself. Old glass. Uneven table. Nothing to do with me. She looked at me, still smiling, eyes soft, like she was listening to music I couldn't hear. As the night went on, it kept happening. Every time I bent the truth, something answered. A light flickered. A chair leg snapped. A framed photo slid off the wall and cracked on the floor. Always right after. Always close enough that I felt it in my chest. I started choosing my words carefully, but that just made me more aware of how often I lied without meaning to, about work, about my past, about how I was feeling right then. The room felt tighter with every minute. The noises got sharper. The air felt heavy like before a storm. I tried telling the truth on purpose. Full honesty, even when it made me uncomfortable. When I did, nothing happened. The restaurant stayed still. The silence felt loud but safe. The moment I slipped, even a little, something answered back. By the time our food arrived, I was sweating. My hands shook when I lifted my fork. I kept glancing around, expecting the ceiling to crack open. She ate calmly, like this was normal. Like she had been here before and knew how it ended. I wanted to leave. I wanted to get up and walk out and never look back. But every time I thought about it, my mind snagged on the idea that lying to excuse myself would make things worse. Telling the truth would mean admitting I was scared of her. I didn't know which option felt more dangerous. Halfway through the meal, I slipped again. I said something about my family that wasn't true, not because I meant to deceive her, but because the truth felt too personal for a first date. The second I said it, a deep groan rolled through the building. Not a crash, a sound like the walls themselves were unhappy. Dust drifted down from the ceiling. Not chunks, just a fine powder that coated the table and my plate. People started looking around now, unease spreading fast. A server whispered something to another near the kitchen. Someone laughed nervously. Someone else stood up and left. She finally leaned forward a little, eyes still on me, like she was encouraging me to keep talking, like she was waiting. My chest felt tight. My throat burned. I realized then that this wasn't about catching me in lies. It was about pressure, about seeing how much weight I could put on the room before it gave in. Dessert menus hit the table with a dull thud. I didn't remember asking for them. My appetite was gone. The building creaked again, louder this time. A long crack split across the ceiling, stretching like it was reaching for the walls. I told myself to stop, to only tell the truth from now on. But honesty is harder than it sounds when your whole social life is built on small edits. I tried to answer her questions carefully, choosing facts over comfort. Every truth felt like pulling something out of my chest and placing it on the table between us. The room settled when I did that. The groaning eased. The lights steadied. I started to believe I could finish the date without everything falling apart if I stayed honest long enough. Then she asked me how I felt about her. Panic hit fast. The truth was messy. I didn't know her. I was scared. I wanted to leave. I also didn't want to offend her. All of that crashed together, and my mouth chose the easier path. I lied. The response was immediate and violent. The support pillar behind me split wider, the crack ripping downward with a sound like tearing fabric. The floor lurched, plates slid, people screamed. The lights went out completely, plunging us into darkness broken only by emergency glow strips along the walls. The building was giving up. I could hear bricks shifting, beams straining, not exploding, not dramatic, just failing one by one like they were tired of holding everything up. I dropped under the table, hands over my head, heart hammering so hard it hurt. In the chaos, I realized something worse than fear. She wasn't surprised. Even now, even with the place coming apart, she was calm, like she had expected this outcome, like this was the natural result of the choices I kept making. I crawled toward the exit, knocking into chairs and legs, apologizing to no one. I didn't look back at her. I didn't want to see her face while the truth was tearing the world down around us. Outside, the night air hit me like a slap. People spilled onto the street, coughing, crying, staring back at the building as parts of it sagged inward. Sirens wailed in the distance. I leaned against a lamppost and threw up, shaking so hard I could barely stand. The restaurant didn't fully collapse, not right away. It slumped, broken and unsafe like a body that couldn't hold itself upright anymore. Emergency crews rushed in, pushing people back. No one was seriously hurt, somehow. She never came out. The news called it a structural failure. Old building, poor maintenance, bad luck. I watched the coverage the next morning numb, my back pressed to my couch like I needed something solid behind me. I deleted the app. I stopped lying as much as I could, not because I wanted to be better, but because every time I felt the urge, I heard the building groan in my head. Sometimes, late at night, I swear I can still hear her listening. I thought I was just looking for someone to hang out with, someone who seemed normal, and that's what he looked like at first. Tall, quiet, polite, the kind of guy who smiled like he actually meant it. He told me his wife had passed years ago. His grief wasn't overwhelming, just present, subtle, it felt safe. Like he had mourned and moved on, and maybe that was why he seemed so grounded, so careful. The first time I went to his apartment, I noticed the photographs immediately. Not the casual snapshots everyone has on a shelf, but large framed pictures lining the walls, everywhere I looked. Them together on vacations, at birthday parties, in front of a cabin that looked older than anything I recognized. I didn't think much of it at first. I'd assumed they were memories, something to honor someone he loved and lost. I assumed wrong. He offered me a drink, and I took it, trying to ignore the heavy, almost stale smell that hung in the air. It wasn't unpleasant, just old, but the house itself had been holding its breath for decades. He moved around like he was used to having someone else there, like he was living with her still in ways I couldn't understand. I chalked it up to habit. Everyone has routines. Then I noticed the corners of the apartment. Shadows moved differently there. Sometimes I could swear I saw the outline of a woman sitting in a chair that wasn't really a chair, a shape that disappeared when I blinked. My stomach started twisting the longer I stayed. Something wasn't right. He excused himself to the kitchen, and that's when I heard her. Not a voice I could hear across the room, but in my head. Small, urgent trembling. She said I shouldn't be there. I froze. I told myself it was my imagination. Grief affects people in strange ways. Maybe it was just picking up on his loneliness and projecting it. She spoke again, firmer this time. It wasn't coming from me. It was coming from the corner of the living room where no furniture was, a corner where the shadows were heavier. She begged me to run, begged me to leave while I still could. The words crawled across the walls, through the air, pressing into my chest. I tried to move, tried to tell myself it wasn't real. It didn't matter. She was real, or at least as real as someone screaming for their life in a house that should have been empty. I turned to him when he came back, and he smiled. Normal, polite, like nothing had happened. I tried to ask him about the voice, the woman, the corner. He laughed, soft like a sound you hear in a dream and then forget. He said nothing was there, that I was imagining it. That's when the air shifted. The photos on the wall started to feel alive, like they were watching me, tracking me. Faces that smiled in pictures began to look down at me with disappointment, anger, something I couldn't place. The more I looked, the more I realized that she was in every photo. Every single one. Always behind him, always in the background, always staring, always present. And in every picture, her eyes begged me the same thing: run. We sat down on the couch, and the weight of the room pressed against me. I could hear her whispering again, telling me I had made a mistake, telling me he wasn't alone. He didn't notice. He didn't care. It was like the room itself was trying to warn me, and he was the only one who didn't understand. He leaned closer, talking about mundane things, but the words didn't matter. I couldn't focus on him. All I could see were her hands, or what felt like her hands, pressed against the corners of the furniture, her face in the shadows, her whisper scratching at my ears. I felt trapped. I wanted to leave, but my body felt frozen, caught between fear and disbelief. I tried moving, inching toward the door, but every step felt heavier. The apartment didn't want me to leave. The air grew colder, tighter, and I swear I could see her reflection in the mirrors, standing right behind me. I wanted to scream, to run, to throw myself against the walls, but I couldn't. I couldn't stop staring at the corner where she lingered, the corner he would never notice. He laughed again, a sound that should have been comforting, but it wasn't. It didn't match the shape in the corner, the eyes in the pictures, the whispers in my head. He didn't see her. He had never seen her. And then it clicked. Maybe he couldn't see her. Maybe she wasn't bound like he claimed. Maybe she never left. I asked him about the photos, about the way the apartment felt, about the whispers. He kept smiling, kept saying nothing was wrong. And then I noticed it. The bed in the master bedroom. One side perfectly made, the other side untouched for years, still warm, like someone had just lain there and just got up. My stomach turned over. The air in the room grew thick, almost solid. The shadows moved faster now, shapes flickering at the edges of my vision. I couldn't tell if it was fear or reality making everything distort. I wanted to leave, but I felt the weight of her presence, her insistence. She was trying to keep me alive, trying to push me out before it was too late. I finally grabbed my coat and ran for the door. The whispers followed me, rising in urgency, climbing over each other. She was screaming now, screaming at me to leave, to never come back. I stumbled down the hall, tripping over rugs that hadn't been there before. The walls seemed to close in, pushing me forward. The apartment itself was alive, breathing, desperate. When I got outside, the sun was low in the sky, casting long shadows across the street. I didn't look back. I didn't slow down. I ran until I couldn't see his building anymore, until the shadows behind me were just shadows. I called a friend from a payphone, my hands shaking so badly I could barely dial. I didn't say anything, just begged her to stay on the line while I explained nothing at all. I haven't been back since. I haven't responded to his texts or calls. Part of me thinks he still lives there, still alone with her, still pretending. Part of me wonders if she's still there too, stuck in the corners, in the shadows, trying to keep anyone else from getting trapped like me. Every night since that night, I hear a whisper in my dreams. It's soft, it's urgent. Don't go back. Don't open the door. Don't. I met him at a coffee shop, the kind of place with too many plants and exposed brick that pretends to be cozy but smells like burnt espresso most of the time. He was sitting alone reading a book I hadn't heard of, and when our eyes met, he smiled like he already knew me. It wasn't one of those awkward first date smiles. It was confident, like he belonged in the world the way I belonged in mine. I don't know why I agreed to meet him again after that, but I did. The first few weeks were amazing. He was funny in a quiet way, never overbearing, always calm. We talked for hours, wandered through parks, got lost in streets neither of us knew, and it felt effortless. I started noticing little things about him that didn't make sense, though. When I took photos of us together, he never appeared. It wasn't like he blinked or moved at the wrong time. It was like the camera didn't register him at all. At first, I thought it was a glitch, some weird angle, but it kept happening. I didn't want to make him feel weird by asking. Mirrors were worse. I never saw him in them. Sometimes I'd catch a corner of a reflection, a shadow maybe, but never him fully. It was subtle at first, easy to ignore, but after a while it became impossible. I started checking windows, Shiny surfaces, my phone's front camera, anything reflective. Nothing. It was like he existed in the room, but not in the world that reflected back. I told myself I was imagining things. Maybe he had this odd ability to stay unnoticed in photos and reflections. Maybe it was some trick of light. I tried to rationalize it, tried to believe in normalcy. But normalcy doesn't explain the night I found him trapped. We were at his apartment, a small loft on the third floor, walls lined with shelves full of books and odd trinkets, the kind of place that smells like old paper and furniture polish. I was brushing my teeth when I noticed the bathroom mirror acting strange. It wasn't fogged, it wasn't cracked, it wasn't dirty. It was warped. For a split second I thought I saw movement, but it was different. It wasn't me brushing my teeth. It was him stuck inside the glass, screaming. At first I froze. My heart hammered so hard I thought it might break through my chest. His eyes were wide, frantic, desperate. He reached out, but it was like there was a barrier I couldn't see, couldn't touch. He was screaming, but no sound came out of the mirror itself. His body thrashed, but the reflection didn't behave like normal physics. It twisted, stretched, like he was being forced to fit into the glass against his will. I ran from the bathroom, tripping over rugs, knocking over a lamp. My hands shook as I tried to figure out what I was seeing. He wasn't in the room when I looked around. The apartment was empty, quiet, untouched. Only the mirror held him. I slammed my hand against the glass, and he recoiled as if it hurt him to be seen. The image flickered like it was on the edge of disappearing entirely. After that night, I couldn't sleep. I avoided mirrors, cameras, anything reflective. I left windows covered, turned away from shiny floors. Even when we walked together, he tried to act normal, laughed, talked, held my hand, but it felt off. It wasn't him. It was a ghostly imitation, a version of him that could move in the world, but not in reality. I began to dread the nights when we were alone. I started digging, researching reflections, myths, old folklore about trapped spirits and mirrors. I found stories of people cursed, imprisoned in glass by unknown forces, seen only by those sensitive to the anomaly. Everything I read made sense in a way I didn't want it to. I realized I was the only one who could see him trapped. The horror wasn't just that he was missing from mirrors and photos. The horror was that he had been trapped for so long that I didn't even know when it started. One night, curiosity overtook fear. I sat in front of the bathroom mirror with the lights off, just me and the reflection. For a long time, there was nothing. Then slowly, his image appeared, distorted at first, flickering in and out. I could see the panic, the strain, the way his face twisted in desperation. I reached out to touch the glass, and he pressed his hand against it from the inside. It felt cold, impossibly cold, like metal. He screamed silently again. I felt the vibration through the glass, the pressure against my palm. It wasn't just fear. It was pleading. He was begging me to do something, anything, to free him. I tried to pull him out, pull him into my world, but it was impossible. My hands met only smooth, hard glass. The reflection shimmered, and for a moment he looked older, weaker, like he had been trapped for decades, not years. I ran out of the apartment that night. I never went back. I stayed with friends, slept on couches, avoided anything reflective. I blocked him on every platform, avoided the streets near his loft. But the images of him trapped, screaming, haunted me. At night, I see him in windows as we pass, pressed against the glass like he's trying to get out. I see him in polished cars, in puddles after rain, fleeting glimpses that make me jump, my stomach in knots. People ask why I stopped dating, why I never mention him. I lie, say he was abusive, that it didn't work out. But I know the truth. He exists somewhere, somewhere trapped between reflection and reality, visible only in the surfaces that mirror the world, screaming silently. And I wonder if anyone else can see him, or if I'm the only one cursed to witness his imprisonment. Sometimes, when I'm alone, I'll catch a shadow, the movement at the corner of a window, and my first instinct is fear, but also guilt. I left him there. I left him trapped in that mirror and ran. I don't know what keeps him there, who trapped him, or if it's even reversible. The thought of seeing him again in a mirror screaming for help is enough to keep me awake for weeks. I've thought about going back, smashing the mirror, breaking the glass, trying to release him. But what if it's worse? What if he's gone? What if he's been consumed by the mirror? Or worse, what if he wasn't trapped but lived that way, only visible to me? The uncertainty eats at me more than the memory of his reflection screaming. Living with this fear has changed me. Mirrors terrify me. Photographs make me anxious. Every reflective surface in the world seems like a window to something I cannot touch, cannot save. I have avoided friends' homes with large mirrors, refuse to take selfies, even cover windows when I sleep. My life has narrowed, constrained because the image of him trapped keeps following me, appearing in every reflection, waiting. Sometimes I think I should tell someone. Police, therapists, friends. But how do you explain a person trapped in a mirror, screaming silently, visible only to you? I've stopped trying. I've stopped talking about it altogether. It's become part of the background of my life, like the hum of electricity, something always there that I've learned to ignore but never forget. And at night, when the apartment is dark, when I'm alone, I swear I see him. Pressed against the mirror, shaking, screaming, clawing at the surface. His eyes meet mine, and for a fraction of a second, I think he might reach me. But then the reflection flickers and he's gone. Just a shadow in glass, just a memory in polished surfaces, trapped and silent once more. I met her at a music festival, the kind of summer evening where the air smells like fried food and grass and the sound of drums vibrates through your chest. She was sitting on a blanket, scribbling in a notebook, and I thought she looked different from anyone else there, like she didn't belong in the chaos of the crowd, but the chaos belonged to her. We talked that night, wandered between stages, and ended up sitting under string lights with our knees touching. It was easy, natural, and by the end of the weekend I felt like I had known her forever. At first, everything was normal. The first few months were the usual mix of late-night walks, messy apartments, and movie nights with pizza boxes everywhere. Then came the gifts. Small things at first. An old book she'd mentioned, a necklace with a stone she liked, a quirky coffee mug. I didn't think much of it. People exchange gifts, right? But soon it got out of hand. Every coffee, every small date, every little milestone became an excuse for her to save something. And it wasn't just keeping them in a drawer or a box. She displayed them. Shelves, walls, little piles on the floor, meticulously arranged, labeled. Each one was exactly where she wanted it. Each one looked alive. I started to notice the first weird signs when she held onto a small bracelet I'd given her, one I'd thought was unremarkable. That night I had a splitting headache, and I swear I could hear faint whispers coming from the shelf. Not her voice, not anyone I recognized, just murmurs that faded whenever I focused on them. I brushed it off, blamed the long day. But then it happened again and again, every time she held onto something I'd given her. I tried subtle hints, leaving gifts behind without telling her, hoping she'd give them back. She didn't. She didn't forget, didn't misplace them, didn't even glance at me when she walked past. It was like the gifts were part of her now, and somehow part of me too. One night I asked her if we could reorganize, just move some things around, and her reaction froze me. She looked at me with this calm, unsettling smile and said, her voice low, that I didn't understand, that she couldn't let go of them. I laughed, nervously, thinking it was a joke. It wasn't. The first time I realized how serious it was, I woke up in the middle of the night to the sound of glass cracking. All the small trinkets on her shelves were vibrating, moving slightly like a pulse. My chest hurt, my heartbeat pounding, and I felt lightheaded, dizzy, as though the air around me was thick. She came out of her bedroom, pale but calm, and said that the gifts weren't just reminders. They were bonds. She said she could keep pieces of me. I laughed it off, pretending to be scared, thinking she meant emotionally. I didn't know she meant literally. Things escalated slowly, subtle at first. My hands would ache when I passed her displays. I'd hear my name whispered from objects on her shelves. A small note I'd tucked in a book she had put away years ago appeared under my pillow one morning, written in my handwriting, but with a trembling I didn't recognize. At night, sometimes I could see a faint glow from the shelves, tiny sparks like fireflies, and I felt it in my chest, a tugging, as though something was pulling at me from inside. I tried to break up with her, tried to leave one night after another fight about space. She didn't panic, didn't cry. She smiled. She told me that she couldn't let me go, that she had kept me. My stomach dropped. I thought it was a metaphor. Then she held up a small velvet box, opened it, and my chest seized so hard I fell to my knees. Inside, where I expected a necklace or a ring, was a small, dark mass that looked like my heart. It was beating slowly, but it was mine, and she held it between her hands like it was nothing, like a coin she'd been collecting. I don't remember the next few hours clearly. I tried to take it back, tried to fight her, but the more I struggled, the more I realized how heavy my chest felt, how my body was responding to the absence of what had once been inside me. She didn't let me scream, didn't let me run. She just held it, smiling, telling me I was hers now completely, that she could take as much of me as she wanted. The air around me pulsed with something I couldn't explain, something unnatural. Days after that, I existed in her apartment like a shadow. I could move, I could eat, I could talk, but my chest never felt right. The shelves were full of gifts from the past years, and each one hummed softly. Sometimes at night, one would rattle violently, and my chest would seize. I learned quickly which items to ignore, which ones to watch. It became a twisted routine. She would touch something, and I would feel the pulse of it inside me. Every small object was tethered to me, a link she could use whenever she wanted. I tried to escape once. I grabbed my coat and ran to the door, but the second I left the threshold, pain shot through my chest, my lungs burning. I stumbled back inside, clutching my heart, watching her casually adjust a lamp on a shelf, completely calm. It was then I understood that leaving was no longer an option. The gifts had anchored me. I was trapped, tethered, and my own life depended on her whim. She explained to me once, calmly, over tea like we were having a normal afternoon, that every gift I had ever given her carried a little part of me in it, but the velvet box with my heart was the final piece. She said it gave her power over me, over my body, over my existence. The items were more than keepsakes. They were conduits. She had collected me, curated me, and now she owned me entirely. I learned to live with it, or what I assumed was living. I eat when she allows, sleep when she allows, and sometimes, when she is feeling playful, she'll rattle a shelf and my chest will tighten, a reminder of her control. I can't leave, I can't fight. The items are everywhere, on shelves, in drawers, hidden behind books. Even when I close my eyes, I can feel the tug of them, the weight of them. Friends have stopped asking why I never visit, never call, never have a life outside of her apartment. I don't lie anymore. I just stay silent, feeling the pulse of my chest, feeling the weight of every gift I ever gave her, feeling the pull of her possession. She smiles, and sometimes, when she thinks I'm not watching, she caresses the small velvet box on the shelf, where a replica of my heart sits now, and I know it's mine entirely. I've stopped thinking about freedom. I've stopped thinking about the world outside her apartment. The gifts, the shelves, the velvet box, my own chest, are all I know. She owns me completely, and sometimes, when I accidentally glance at a necklace or a tiny figurine she's kept, I feel my chest tighten and a whisper of panic hits me, like it's the first time I realized what I've lost. And then she smiles, and I remember I belong to her now entirely. He was sitting in the corner, sketching on a notebook, and when our eyes met, I had this strange feeling like I'd seen him somewhere before, but I knew I hadn't. We started talking casually about books and music, and there was something magnetic about him, something that made the chaos of the crowded cafe disappear. We ended up walking together in the rain, and by the time we parted that day, I felt a thrill I hadn't felt in years. Our first date was at a small rooftop bar a few nights later. He predicted what we would order down to the drink and the appetizer. At first, I thought it was coincidence, cute even. He described exactly how the conversation would go, what I would say, and how I would laugh. I laughed, thinking it was charming, a little strange, but harmless. As the night went on, everything he predicted came true with terrifying precision. It was like living inside his mind instead of my own. By the end of that night, I couldn't shake the feeling that he wasn't guessing. He was certain. After a few weeks, it became more intense. Every date had a script, every word I would say already anticipated. He knew how I would tilt my head, how I would glance at the skyline, which stories I would tell, and how I would tell them. It was impressive, almost romantic at first, but quickly it became suffocating. The world started to feel smaller, like I was trapped in a repeating loop, and he was the center of it. I felt like a character in a story and I hadn't agreed to be in, and he was the narrator. The first time he predicted something dark, I froze. We were walking through an art gallery and he stopped in front of a painting. He told me exactly how I would die, describing the scene in horrifying detail, down to the color of my shirt, the sound of my heels on the concrete, even the taste of coffee in my mouth. I laughed nervously, thinking it was a twisted joke, a way to test my reaction. But I couldn't shake the way his eyes stayed calm, clinical, like he'd already knew it and it had happened before. After that, the predictions didn't stop. He would describe arguments we would have before they happened, embarrassments before they unfolded, moments of pain before I felt them. I started noticing patterns in the streets, in our routines. Every corner we turned, every cafe we entered, he had a prediction ready. Sometimes he would pause and look at me like he was adjusting the timeline, like he was trying again and again to make something perfect. I started paying attention to his notebooks. The pages were filled with names, dates, little notes, my name repeated in different forms, different ages, and always the same scenarios unfolding with minute changes. It became clear to me one night, sitting across from him in a dimly lit diner, that he was reliving the same relationship over and over. He was trying to fix something, though I couldn't tell what. Every small smile, every pause in the conversation, every laugh, it was rehearsed, refined, like he was testing me, testing us over and over again. My stomach would twist when he mentioned things I hadn't said yet, but were coming. He wasn't just predicting, he was guiding, shaping the world around me to fit the story he was obsessed with. One night, he predicted a fight that hadn't even started. He described exactly how it would escalate, how I would raise my voice, how the words would cut, how the diner table would shake as I slammed my hand down. I panicked. I told myself it couldn't happen, but the words came out exactly as he predicted, the tension mounting in precise increments. He didn't flinch, didn't react. It was like watching a shadow of reality play out, a rehearsal of something terrible he couldn't stop. The day I realized I was part of a loop, trapped in his endless attempts to alter history, was the day he predicted my death with a precision that made me shiver despite myself. He told me I would trip on the curb, fall under a car, and there would be no one to save me. The description was so vivid, so detailed, that I could almost see it. I started noticing small discrepancies in my surroundings, tiny differences in the people we passed, in the placement of objects, as if reality itself was trying to tell me something. He was living the same days, replaying the same encounters, trying again and again to change the ending. I began to avoid him, hoping to break the cycle, hoping to stop the predictions. But it was impossible. Wherever I went, whatever I did, he was already there, anticipating it, shaping it, guiding it. It wasn't stalking in a normal sense. It was like he was bending time around him, reusing the same scenes until they fit what he wanted. I started sleeping less, watching him from across streets, cafes, even libraries, noticing that everything repeated in subtle but unnerving ways. The final realization hit me when I found his collection of old photos and receipts tucked away in a drawer at his apartment. Each one was labeled with my name, different versions of me at different ages in different settings, all ending the same way. It wasn't just that he predicted my death. He had witnessed it countless times, failed to stop it countless times, and every date with me was another attempt to get it right. I was a ghost in his experiments, a participant in an unending cycle of obsession. He noticed me looking at the drawer. His expression didn't change. He told me, without emotion, that he had tried everything, that he was trying to save me, trying to change the ending that always ended wrong. I wanted to scream, to run, but the moment I left the room, I knew the streets outside would follow the same pattern, the same rhythm, the same deadly predictions waiting to unfold. The loop didn't end. I was caught in it like a character who didn't know the rules of the story, and he was the author, the one trying desperately to write the perfect ending that never came. I stopped trying to argue, stopped resisting. I started following the script, watching every move he predicted, testing the edges of the reality he bent. The city, the cafe, the rooftop bar, even the diner, everything became part of the stage. And the predictions kept coming, some small, some terrifyingly detailed, always about me, always about the loop, always about failure and inevitability. Sometimes I think I've seen versions of myself that existed in other loops, faces that look like mine but with slight differences, trapped in the same scenarios, walking the same streets, laughing at the same jokes, falling the same way. I started noticing them in reflections, in crowds and windows, and then I wonder if they're real or just another layer of the cycle. He watches them, notes them, and tries to correct them. I've realized there's no end, no escape. The predictions are endless looping like some endless reel that he can't stop running. The last night I remember clearly, I was sitting on a bench near the fountain where we had our first real conversation. He described every detail, every word, every breath I would take, and I could feel my pulse matching the rhythm of his predictions. I knew the loop would continue even if I closed my eyes, even if I ran. The city, the streets, the cafes, the diners, the rooftops, all replayed the same dates, the same words, the same scenarios. He smiled at me, calm, precise, knowing, as if he finally found a moment that almost worked. And I understood fully that I wasn't dating a man. I was dating time, or obsession, or a pattern he could never break. Every prediction about me, every rehearsal, every replay was a step in the same unending cycle, and I was the only constant, the witness and the victim, the character in a story that would never end. The loop would continue, the predictions would continue, and one day, or rather, every day, he would try again to get it right, and I would be there, forced to follow the script he already wrote, already knows, already failed to fix. I don't even know how to start this because it still makes no sense to me, and I've been trying to piece it together for weeks. It started as a normal Friday night. I met her at a new cocktail lounge downtown, the kind with low lights and jazz playing faintly in the background. She had this energy that made everything else fade, the way she laughed, the way she tilted her head when she listened. We talked for hours, or at least I think we did, because the next morning I woke up in my apartment with no memory of the last 6 hours. My phone was a mess. Text from her, one that just said come over, a few others that didn't make sense. I rubbed my temples, trying to remember if we had gone somewhere else, or if we had stayed at the lounge, or if I had even taken her home. Nothing. Total blank. The kind of blank that makes your stomach drop. I checked the time. It was 8 in the morning, sunlight streaming in through my blinds. My clothes were different than what I remembered wearing, slightly wrinkled, and there was a strange sticky smell in the room that I couldn't place. I shook it off as spilled drinks or something from the lounge. That's when I saw it. On the floor, near my nightstand, was a smear of something dark. I froze, my heart beating faster than I ever thought it could. It wasn't bright red, not fresh, but it was definitely blood. And then I noticed my hands, my shirt, my sleeves. There were streaks of it everywhere. I panicked, trying to tell myself it was a dream, that maybe I had cut myself, that I was imagining it. I hadn't cut myself. Nothing on me. I touched my face, my arms, but it wasn't mine. I could feel it. Something wrong in the texture, the smell, the heaviness of it. It wasn't mine. I needed answers. I went to her place, hoping she could fill in the gaps. When I knocked, no one answered. The door was unlocked, which was strange, but I went in anyway. The place was spotless, too clean, like she had been expecting me. On her coffee table was a tablet streaming security footage from the lounge. I froze. I didn't want to watch it, but I had to. I pressed play. The footage started normal. Us sitting at the bar, drinks in hand, laughing. Then something changed. We left the bar together. The timestamp jumped. I saw us walking into a dark alley behind the lounge. At first, I thought it was blurry, my memory playing tricks. But then the camera caught me proposing to her. I couldn't breathe. I didn't even know we were engaged, we were close like that. I was on one knee, holding a ring, my clothes covered in blood. So much blood. Not mine, I could tell instantly. It was thick, glistening under the streetlight, dripping onto the pavement. She smiled, took the ring, and then she leaned in and kissed me. And I blacked out. I rewound, watched it again and again. Tried to see what happened before, how the blood got there. Nothing. No weapon, no one around. Just us, the dark alley, and the blood. It didn't make sense. I tried calling her, but her number was disconnected. I went to the lounge, asked if they had cameras outside. They did. The footage from outside showed the alley empty when we left. No one following us, no bodies, no bloodstains. Like it had been conjured, like it existed only on the tablet she had. After that, I couldn't think straight. I spent hours trying to retrace my steps, going to the streets we supposedly walked, looking for blood, for clues, for anything that made this make sense. Nothing. The alley was clean, the lounge was normal. The ring she took from me had vanished from my pocket. It was like none of it had happened, except my body and mind remembered. The sticky smell lingered on my clothes, on my sheets, a faint metallic note that made me gag every time I noticed it. I started seeing her everywhere after that. Not in person, but in reflections in corners of my vision on street cameras I didn't know I was near. She was always smiling, holding out her hand like she wanted me to follow her again. I tried telling people, friends, coworkers, but they either laughed or said I looked exhausted. How do you explain hours of your life missing, proposing covered in blood that isn't yours, to anyone? It sounds insane, but every detail was etched in my memory, vivid and wrong and terrifying. I tried avoiding her. Stopped going out, stayed in, locked the doors, covered mirrors. I thought it would help, give me some distance, but the missing hours kept happening. Nights would pass in flashes, waking up in different clothes, different parts of the city, sometimes with small cuts or scratches that weren't there before. And the tablet footage, when I saw it, kept changing. Every time I tried to watch it, the alley looked slightly different, the blood more or less. Sometimes my hand held a knife, sometimes it didn't. She was always smiling, always in control, always taking the ring. I thought about calling the police, but there was nothing to report. No bodies, no crime scene, no witnesses. Even the lounge employees didn't see us leave the bar. The only proof, the only horror, was on her tablet, and she was gone. Vanished. The longer this went on, the more I started noticing patterns. Every time I remembered a missing chunk of time, there was always a proposal, always blood, always her taking the ring. It became like a loop, something she orchestrated to trap me, to make me relive the same horrifying moment over and over without end. Sometimes I wondered what would happen if I found her again, if I confronted her, begged for answers, tried to stop whatever she was doing. But the thought of following her down that alley again, of feeling that metallic smell, of seeing the blood that isn't mine, makes my stomach twist. I feel like I've been marked, like my life is permanently tied to her, to those missing hours that shouldn't exist. I can't tell if the proposals happened once or 100 times, if the blood is real or some trick she's playing on my mind. Every day I wake up expecting to see it all again, waiting for the missing hours to start, knowing there's nothing I can do to stop it. The strangest part is how calm I feel sometimes, watching the footage late at night, almost hypnotized by the way she moves, the way the scene repeats. I can't explain why. Terror and fascination have merged in me, and I keep thinking that maybe if I could just understand her, just follow her rules, the missing hours would stop. But they never do. She's always there smiling, always taking the ring, always leaving me covered in someone else's blood and then gone. I don't leave the apartment much anymore. I try to eat, to sleep, to live like a normal person, but the fear is always lurking. I've started recording my nights with cameras, hoping to catch the missing hours in real time, to finally know what happens. So far, nothing. Just the normal dark of the apartment, the hum of the fridge, the faint light of the street outside. But I know it's coming again. I know she's out there, planning the next date, orchestrating the next loop. And one day, the cameras will catch her again, and I'll see myself proposing covered in blood that isn't mine, and she'll smile. And I'll remember everything I don't want to, and the missing hours will start again. I didn't think meeting his family would be terrifying. Honestly, I thought it would be awkward, a little uncomfortable, maybe a few weird questions and too much dessert. He had been hinting for weeks, insisting that I meet them, saying it would be a special day. I didn't question it much, trusting him, thinking it was just one of those awkward relationship milestones. The drive to their house wasn't long, but the streets became narrower, the trees older, twisted in ways that made the sky look smaller. I joked to myself about rural creepiness, about how horror movies start like this, but I laughed too quietly, feeling my stomach tighten. When we pulled up, the house looked like it had been frozen in time. The paint was faded, the lawn overgrown in a meticulous way, like someone had trimmed only certain areas to make it look alive. The windows were dark, reflective, showing nothing inside but faint shapes. The front door opened before he could knock, and a woman stepped out. She was beautiful in a pale, unnatural way, her skin almost waxy, her hair perfectly in place. Her smile didn't reach her eyes, and yet it made me feel nervous, like I had done something wrong just by standing there. She introduced herself as his mother, and the moment she spoke, the air changed. It was heavy, thick, like the scent of old roses pressed in a book. The inside of the house was even stranger. The furniture was ornate, too polished, and the walls were lined with portraits. Every face in the paintings had that same unnatural stillness, almost embalmed, like time had stopped when the paint dried. They were beautiful, but in a way that made me hold my breath. He held my hand, squeezing it, telling me not to worry. I nodded, but I already felt a weight on my chest, a tension that didn't belong in a normal living room. Then I saw them. The family members were seated around a large dining table, silent, statuesque, their skin pale, eyes too bright, mouths slightly parted. My first thought was that they were sick, maybe aging badly, but something in the way they moved or didn't move made me realize this wasn't normal. They didn't breathe audibly, and the quiet was absolute, oppressive. The kind of quiet that makes your ears ring and your heart beat louder. He introduced me one by one, and their faces didn't change, their expressions fixed like porcelain dolls. I tried to make conversation, awkward questions, compliments about the house, about the garden outside, about the food that had been prepared. Their replies were faint, almost whispers, but they were deliberate, each word carefully measured. The more I spoke, the more I felt a pressure building, like I had stepped into something sacred and profane at the same time. I noticed his mother watching me more than anyone, her eyes sharp, calculating, and the corner of her lips curved slightly. It wasn't until later, when everyone else left the dining room for some strange reason, that she leaned close to me. Her voice was soft, but it cut through the silence like a knife. She said, "You'll keep him alive longer than the others." My stomach dropped, and a cold rush ran through me. I froze, staring at her, trying to understand if it was a joke, a warning, a test. But her face was dead serious, almost gleeful in a way that didn't belong in a living room. The way she said it made my blood run cold. I wanted to pull away, to run, but my hands were pinned under hers as she gripped them lightly, almost reverently. After that, the rest of the visit felt distorted. The family remained seated, silent, unmoving, watching me from their chairs, as if studying my reactions. He smiled at me, but it felt forced, strained. I tried to ask questions about his life, about memories, anything that would make them seem human. They answered, but their words were hollow, like echoes of sound without substance. The paintings on the walls seemed to watch me too, the eyes following me when I moved, the faces shifting subtly when I wasn't looking directly. It was unnerving. I went to the kitchen to pour myself some water, and there she was again, his mother. She was holding a small black book, worn and frayed, with writing in a language I couldn't recognize. She handed it to me without speaking, and when I opened it, the pages were filled with drawings of him, in different stages of life, all labeled with dates. Some of the pages were old, some recent, but all of them ended the same way. Him lying still, eyes wide open, pale as the family around me. My hands shook, dropping the book onto the counter, and I felt her presence behind me. She didn't move, didn't need to. The silence alone carried weight, warning. The rest of the day passed in a haze. I ate food that tasted oddly metallic, the family staring without breaking their posture, and he kept smiling, holding my hand, whispering reassurances. But I could feel the tension building, the air growing heavier. Every time I blinked, I caught a subtle movement, slight twitches in the hands of the family, the corners of their mouths tightening, their eyes glinting unnaturally. I realized then that they weren't ill, weren't sick, they weren't living the way I understood living. They were something else, something in between, frozen yet conscious, watching, waiting. Night came, and he suggested we stay overnight. I agreed reluctantly, my mind in overdrive. The bedroom was large, with high ceilings and velvet curtains. The air smelled faintly of incense and something metallic. I tried to sleep, but every time I closed my eyes, I saw them seated at the dining table, staring at me through my eyelids. I tried to tell myself it was just stress, imagination, paranoia, but the memory of his mother's words echoed in my head. "You'll keep him alive longer than the others." I didn't sleep well. When I woke in the middle of the night, I saw shadows moving. The family members were standing at the edge of the room, silent, their faces painted with that same embalmed perfection, and he was asleep, oblivious. His mother stepped forward, whispering again, almost tenderly, almost lovingly, the same words, repeating them like a chant. I wanted to scream, to run, to shake him awake, but I couldn't move. It was like gravity had doubled, pressing me to the bed, binding me. She reached toward him, adjusting something on his chest, and I noticed the faintest pulse of light, almost like it was beating with his heart, visible through his shirt. I stayed frozen until morning, and by the time the sun filtered weakly through the curtains, they were all gone, back to their chairs in the dining room, waiting. He woke as if nothing had happened, smiling at me, asking if I slept well. The family was silent as always, watching from behind closed doors. I realized then that this wasn't a normal visit, wasn't a family meeting. It was an initiation, a test, and I had passed in a way I didn't want to. He was alive because I was there, because they had chosen me, because his mother believed I could do what they couldn't. Keep him alive, longer than the others. The rest of the weekend was a blur of odd rituals, quiet observations, and meals that tasted wrong. I saw him behave differently around them, almost as if he were a vessel for their control, a living object in the house of the half-dead. His laughter sounded hollow sometimes, echoing off the walls, mismatched with his eyes. When we finally left, I thought about never returning, about cutting ties, about pretending I'd never met them. But something in me knew that wasn't possible. They had marked me, subtly, invisibly. I could feel it in the way he looked at me, the way his mother's words lingered in my mind. I was tied to him now, to them, to their expectation. I still think about that day, replay the images in my head of the family, frozen yet watching, the book with the sketches, the whispers in the dark. I try to tell myself it's over, that it was just a weekend visit, that I'm imagining it. But the moment I close my eyes, I hear her voice, soft, almost sweet, carrying across space and time. You'll keep him alive longer than the others. And I realize I will, because there's no other way. I met her at a coffee shop one rainy evening, the kind of drizzle that makes everything smell wet and metallic and makes you feel like the world has shrunk just enough to notice the small details. She was sitting alone in the corner, sketching something I couldn't see, with a faint smile that seemed to hover between amusement and sorrow. I don't know why, but I felt drawn to her instantly, like some invisible thread had pulled me across the room. I convinced myself it was chemistry, that ridiculous thing people talk about, but looking back now, I realized it was something darker, something predatory I didn't recognize at the time. Our first few dates were normal enough, in that blurry way that early love often is. We went to diners, parks, and museums, places that felt safe and easy. But I started noticing subtle things almost immediately. My energy would drain after being around her. Not in a metaphorical, tiring relationship way, but physically. My chest felt heavy, my limbs weak, like I had run a marathon without moving. At first, I chalked it up to anxiety, stress, maybe even lack of sleep. She seemed to be unaffected. In fact, she seemed to glow brighter and younger with every day we spent together. I joked about it, telling myself she was just lucky with skin or diet or genetics. But my hands would tremble when I looked at her, and the mirror reflected a pale version of me I didn't recognize. After a few weeks, the pattern became impossible to ignore. My friends started asking if I was sick. I would nod and brush it off, but deep down I knew. Every time I loved her, truly loved her, I got weaker. I tried to deny it, tried to distance myself in small ways, but it felt like she could sense it, and when I pulled back, she smiled that strange half-smile, half-sadness that felt like it had a life of its own. My body started showing it too. My hair thinned slightly, dark circles appeared under my eyes, my appetite dropped. I blamed work, diet, everything except her. The strangest part was how she changed. Her skin became smoother, her hair glossier, her laughter lighter, more youthful. The first time I noticed, it hit me like a punch. I had given her my attention, my love, and somehow she was absorbing it, feeding on it, growing more vibrant while I faded. It wasn't just physical either. Emotionally, she seemed younger, more innocent, more playful. Memories she shared about herself became contradictory, like she was rewriting her past. I started keeping notes, subtle things, small dates, descriptions, even photos, and realized she was aging backward while I was slipping forward, closer to exhaustion and frailty. We spent a weekend at a lake cabin, and that was when it became undeniable. I woke up in the middle of the night feeling like my heart was collapsing, each beat dragging the rest of me down. She was beside me, her face illuminated by moonlight, untouched by time, untouched by fatigue. I could see faint traces of my own weakness mirrored in her reflection on the window. I realized then she wasn't just draining me. She was feeding carefully, methodically, and the more I'd opened my heart, the stronger she became. It wasn't subtle anymore. My hands shook, and my knees nearly gave out when I stood. She looked at me and smiled softly, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear, perfectly unaware of the devastation she'd cause. I tried to leave after that, telling myself I was imagining things, that maybe I had some illness or stress-induced psychosis. But every time I pulled away, she would appear somewhere, my apartment, my favorite coffee shop, even outside my office, always with that same calm, radiant smile. It was terrifying. She didn't chase me in the traditional sense, but I could feel her presence in every place I loved, every place I needed comfort, like she had tethered herself to my life, and there was no escape. I started tracking my own health obsessively, measuring heart rate, blood pressure, even weight. Every day, there was a decline. Every day, she seemed a little younger, a little more vibrant. She told me nothing about herself beyond vague stories that never aligned. One day, she mentioned a childhood in a city I knew didn't exist anymore, and another day, she talked about a high school graduation that would have made her 20 years younger than I had believed. I confronted her once, asking directly, and she laughed softly, like a bell in a cathedral, beautiful and horrifying, and said nothing, just leaned closer. It was the way she said nothing, the way her silence carried that hunger, that certainty that broke me more than words could. My friends began noticing my decline. My coworkers commented on how pale I looked, how gaunt. I stopped going out, stopped calling, stopped existing beyond her shadow. Yet she was growing, glowing, almost incandescent. I remember staring at her reflection in a spoon during dinner, and she was laughing, her skin perfect, eyes wide and alive, while I looked like a ghost clinging to a memory of myself. The thought hit me like ice water. She wasn't human, not entirely. She existed because she consumed love, because she thrived on it, and my affection was her sustenance. I tried breaking up. I packed bags, left letters, deleted numbers, all the things people do to sever ties. She appeared anyway, always calm, always patient, smiling like I was being silly. The first time she held my hand after I tried to leave, I felt every ounce of energy drain out of me. She didn't need force. She didn't need threats. She just existed, and my love, my care, my very devotion became her fuel. Every tear, every moment of affection, every heartbeat that belonged to her made me weaker, made her younger, brighter, more radiant. As months passed, my reflection became stranger. My eyes sank deeper, my skin lost warmth. I noticed faint veins beneath my hands, pale blue and twisting like tiny rivers. She, in contrast, was a living spring, untouched by stress, untouched by worry, untouched by time. She started bringing new energy to places we went together. Cafes, parks, bookstores. She would enter, and it felt like the air itself leaned toward her. People smiled, noticed her presence, and I could feel nothing but hollowness. It was a cruelty I couldn't escape. One day I fainted in the middle of the street. She caught me, of course, and held me close as my vision tunneled. I felt my heart slow, my limbs collapse, and the edges of the world blur. When I woke up, she was gone, leaving a faint perfume in the air, something floral but sharp, alive, impossible to place. My body ached, my bones felt hollow, my blood sluggish. I realized then that leaving her wasn't an option. She had tethered herself to me, and my survival depended on her presence. Every attempt to resist made my body scream. I started thinking about others she might have drained. Strangers on trains, brief flings, fleeting relationships. Maybe this was her life, her pattern, the way she lived. She needed heartbreak, needed love, needed devotion like a fire needs oxygen, and I had to become her next source. The realization was terrifying but strangely clear. I couldn't fight her. I couldn't escape her. Every day I loved her more. Every day I weakened. Every day she became younger, more alive, more untouchable. I tried documenting everything, photographing her subtly, noting changes in her face, skin, posture. But the images always betrayed me. In pictures, she looked the same, eternal, perfect, while I looked like I was melting, dissolving, fading into shadow. Even my phone seemed to recognize the imbalance. Battery drained faster when she was near. Apps froze when she laughed. Reality itself seemed to bend in her presence. I have stopped leaving the apartment. I stopped speaking to friends. I stay close to her, feeding her, loving her, giving every ounce of devotion I can manage. The outside world is too bright, too dangerous, too full of distractions that might weaken her attention. She is beautiful, radiant, eternal, and I am fragile, dwindling, barely more than a wisp of who I once was. Sometimes I catch glimpses in mirrors and reflections. She is younger than yesterday, fresher, more alive. And I am weaker, paler, older in every frame. I can't resist her. I can't fight. I am trapped in this slow decline, and she thrives. The paradox is unbearable. To love her is to die is to love her. I can't stop. I won't, because she is happiness, she is life, and I am nothing without her. This is what it's like, falling for someone who feeds on heartbreak. It's not sudden. It's not obvious. It's slow, invisible, unstoppable. She smiles, and I dissolve a little more. She laughs, and I disappear further. And she grows younger, always radiant, forever untouchable, while I fade into the air, a sacrifice to her vitality. He was sitting alone, staring at a cracked mirror behind the bar, and I felt drawn to him immediately. There was something in his eyes, like he carried a story he didn't want to tell, and yet the pull was irresistible. I sat down, and somehow we started talking, though neither of us said much at first. It was quiet, comfortable, dangerous without being obvious. He told me, after a few drinks, that he was cursed, that anyone who loved him died. I laughed at first, assuming it was a dramatic story, but there was something in his tone that made me pause. The first date after that was cautious. He was polite, charming, almost painfully careful with his words and gestures. I wanted to believe it was a lie, some dark joke, but deep down I couldn't shake the feeling that he was telling the truth. Over the next few weeks, the warning stayed with me. I watched the way he avoided certain conversations, the way he flinched when someone expressed affection. I began to notice patterns. People who got too close drifted away quickly, abruptly, as if something had quietly taken them from his life. We started spending more time together, despite the warning, despite the dread. We went to cafes, walked through abandoned streets at night, shared meals in dim apartments with peeling wallpaper and flickering lights. I realized something terrifying yet exhilarating. I didn't feel afraid in the way other people did around him. There was no pounding heart, no nausea. When he reached for my hand, the world didn't shake and my chest didn't tighten. Other people had disappeared around him, but I remained. The first incident that made me question everything happened in a park one evening. A couple nearby laughed, playful, leaning into each other. He looked at them, eyes sharp, and I noticed the man next to them stumble suddenly, clutching his chest. We kept walking, pretending not to see, but the image burned into my mind. He whispered something I didn't hear, and the man fell, silent, eyes wide in shock. I waited, heart hammering, expecting my own chest to seize, expecting to collapse like everyone else, but nothing happened. After that, it became impossible to ignore that something was off. Everyone who had loved him before me, he claimed, had died. Some accidents, some illnesses, some moments that didn't make sense. I started keeping track mentally, cataloging every story he told, trying to see a pattern. The pattern was clear. The closer someone got, the more danger followed. Except me. I should have felt it. I should have known, but I didn't. We moved into a small apartment together eventually, the kind of space with squeaky floors and windows that rattled in the wind. He was careful, constantly explaining ways to avoid accidents, insisting we stay inside certain hours, eat certain foods, avoid certain people. It felt obsessive, but it was comforting. One night, after a storm knocked out the power, he became frantic, pacing the apartment, muttering about curses and love and death. I tried to calm him, and that's when he realized I wasn't reacting the way others did. He stared at me, eyes wide, searching for something in my face, and I felt a cold weight in my stomach. He asked me to leave to go far away, promising it would keep me safe. I didn't want to. I stayed because I loved him, or at least thought I did. Nothing happened. Nights passed, weeks passed, months. Friends came to visit, some he warned off subtly, and the same pattern repeated. Accidents, illnesses, brief disappearances. People who got close to him suffered, but I remained untouched. It was only when we went to his family's old cabin for a weekend that I began to understand. He told me the story of his ancestors, each generation marked by tragedy, each person who fell in love with him meeting inexplicable ends. He confessed that he didn't touch anything that could harm me, that he had tried everything to keep me away from danger, but I was immune. That's when I noticed the small details. His touch didn't burn me, his nearness didn't tighten my chest, his gaze didn't make my vision blur. It was like I was part of a different rule, a different set of physics. Later that night, a fire broke out in the cabin. He tried to carry me out, panicked, while the rest of the property burned. Neighbors later said it was miraculous that anyone survived. The fire consumed everything, took what should have been my death like it had taken everyone else who had loved him. But I was untouched. Standing outside, soot and smoke covering the air, I realized the truth. I wasn't human in the sense he understood. The curse that claimed every heart, every soul that dared to love him, didn't touch me because I wasn't like them. I didn't even understand fully what I was, but my immunity was undeniable. After that, our relationship changed. He became more cautious, fearful, almost reverent. I watched him try to measure my reactions, test my survival, and every time I passed. I began to see the pattern in him, not just the curse he carried, but the way he lived in constant dread of connection. He had never known someone like me, someone unaffected, someone untouchable. I started noticing other differences, small things at first. Minor wounds healed too quickly, my hunger didn't follow normal rhythms. I didn't feel the aches and fatigue he did after long days. Strangers reacted strangely to me, sometimes recoiling subtly, sometimes staring longer than was polite. It wasn't until a month later, during a particularly violent storm, that it became undeniable. Lightning struck near our apartment, shattering the street below with fire and debris. Neighbors screamed, cars overturned, trees fell. He grabbed me, terrified, expecting me to collapse like everyone else, expecting the curse to catch me mid-step. But I didn't flinch. I was fine. That's when he told me he had been waiting for someone like me his whole life, someone untouched, someone beyond the curse. He confessed the truth he had never shared, that perhaps the curse wasn't really on him. Not exactly, but on love itself. Everyone who cared for him deeply, everyone who invested their heart in him, became a casualty of that power. I was the anomaly, immune in a way he couldn't explain. I started experimenting subtly, testing the limits of my survival. I reached out to people who had been close to him, those he had warned about, and nothing happened to me. I could move through his life without triggering the catastrophic consequences that had defined him for decades. Slowly, horrifyingly, I began to understand what I was. A predator of fate, a force that could endure what others could not. The realization was disturbing. I didn't want to accept it, but every instinct, every surviving heartbeat screamed the truth. I wasn't human like those who had died around him. After that, life settled into a strange rhythm. He remained cautious, almost fearful, constantly watching over me, still terrified of this curse, still haunted by the past, and I moved alongside him, alive and untouched. Love, for me, was no longer a risk. It was a tool, a force that others around him couldn't wield without consequence. I had to live differently now, aware of the world's fragility and my own immunity. I became a shadow in his life, the one constant that broke the cycle of death he had carried for years. The most terrifying realization came when I looked at myself in the mirror one night, bruised and soot-stained from some minor accident. The cuts were gone within hours. My reflection didn't waver. My pulse, when I checked it, was steady and unnaturally calm. The truth settled in like ice. I had survived something meant to kill anyone who loved him, and nothing in this life could take me. I wasn't human in the way the world understood, not in the way he had always feared. And somehow, that knowledge changed everything. Now, living with him, I understand the delicate balance. He remains cautious, haunted, fearful of every bond that might form around him, and I exist alongside him, untouchable, alive, a silent guardian of my own immunity. Love no longer carries the fatal consequences it once did, at least for me, but the shadows of those who fell still linger, memories and names etched into the air around him. Every time I watch him sleep, exhausted from another day of self-imposed isolation, I know that I am the only reason the pattern has stopped, the only reason someone has survived his curse. And the more I live, the more I realize that survival doesn't feel like victory. It feels like responsibility, terrifying and inescapable, as if the world itself has handed me a role I never asked for but cannot refuse. The bar we met at was one of those places with cheap lighting, too loud music, and booths that smelled like old beer and fried food. I didn't expect much. Just another forgettable date, maybe some company to make the night go by faster. But the moment she walked in, something about her made my stomach tighten. It wasn't attraction in the usual sense. It was more like recognition, like she already belonged in the corners of my mind I usually tried to ignore. Our first date was uncomfortable in ways I didn't fully understand at the time. She asked questions that went beyond the usual, but instead of small talk, she brought up details about my past that nobody else knew. Not the obvious things, the deep stuff, the moments I had buried because they were too painful, too shameful. She knew about my father's accident, about the fire in my apartment years ago, about the choices I'd made in college that I swore I'd never tell anyone. It was unnerving, but I told myself she was just perceptive, maybe too curious. Still, every time she spoke, it felt like she was peeling layers off me without asking permission, and I couldn't look away. After that night, I kept thinking about her. Every conversation felt like a trap, but also like a lifeline. She was patient, but insistent, coaxing memories out of me I had long tried to hide. We went on walks through the empty streets of the city at night, past shuttered shops and graffiti walls that smelled faintly of wet concrete. I started noticing things. How she always knew what to say to make me flinch. How she watched my face for reactions like she was reading an unspoken confession. It was unnerving, the way she had mapped my inner guilt without ever being told. Weeks passed, and the dates became rituals. I dreaded them and craved them in the same breath. The more time I spent with her, the more I felt the weight of my own past pressing against me, like every suppressed memory was a small stone she was piling on my chest. I noticed patterns in her behavior, little habits that didn't make sense until later. She always arrived at the exact moment I needed to confront a memory, always asked the right question at the right time. It wasn't luck. She was methodical, and the knowledge she had of me wasn't just from listening or observation. It felt like she had been inside my head, crawling through the corridors of my shame. I started keeping a journal to try to understand it, scribbling every detail of our dates, every revelation, every reaction. I wrote about the nights she made me revisit the fire in my apartment, made me describe the smell of smoke, the panic, the feeling of helplessness if my possessions turned to ash. I wrote about the moment I confessed to someone else's accident years ago, something I had blamed on myself but never admitted aloud. She had guided me to that confession with terrifying precision. The act of writing it down, of seeing it on paper, made it feel real in a way I wasn't ready for. It wasn't until a month in that I started seeing her in places where she hadn't been. On the subway, standing silently in the corner of my vision, disappearing when I blinked. In mirrors, catching glimpses of her behind me when I was alone in the bathroom. I chalked it up to paranoia at first, but then came the dreams, vivid, disjointed, filled with the worst moments of my past. She was always there, standing silently, waiting. In the dreams, she didn't speak, but her presence demanded confession, demanded acknowledgement of the guilt I had tried to bury. One night, after a particularly intense date, I woke up in my apartment to the sound of her voice in the darkness. The voice was familiar, but not quite real, like it was coming from inside my own head. She was reciting details of my life, things I hadn't shared with anyone, things I thought I had forgotten. The air grew thick, oppressive, like it was pressing against my lungs, and I realized the terror wasn't just in her knowledge. It was in the fact that she existed in some way beyond the physical. She wasn't just a woman who knew my secrets. She was my guilt made flesh, the embodiment of every misdeed and failure I had shoved into the corners of my mind. I tried to confront her, to tell her to leave, but it was pointless. She wasn't a person I could reason with. She existed to make me confess, to force the weight of my past onto the present. I felt the same panic I had felt when I watched my father fall, when I watched my apartment burn, when I realized I had hurt people and made mistakes that couldn't be undone. She was there for every one of those moments, and now she was here to ensure I faced them all. The following weeks were a blur. Every date, every encounter became more intense. She guided me through memories I had spent years trying to escape, forcing me to acknowledge every lie, every omission, every act of cruelty. I started keeping my apartment bare, trying to minimize the triggers, but nothing helped. She was there in the walls, in the reflections, in the quiet moments before sleep. Sometimes I woke to find her sitting across the room, perfectly still, watching me, waiting for the confession that would never truly end. The final realization came one night when I was standing in front of my bedroom mirror, staring at my own reflection. She appeared behind me, silent, and I understood. She had never been a woman I met in a bar, had never been a date or companion. She was always this, my guilt made physical, my failures incarnate, my misdeeds personified. The intimate details she knew weren't coincidences, they weren't research. They were mine. She had always been mine. After that, the dynamic changed. I stopped pretending she was real in the conventional sense and started interacting with her as what she was, the shadow of every wrong I had done. The confession became an unending process. I found myself speaking aloud, recounting every failure, every mistake, every act I had buried under layers of denial. Each time I did, the weight lifted slightly, but never fully. She remained, waiting for the next confession, reminding me that guilt is infinite and that acknowledgement is never complete. I began noticing the physical effects on myself. I stopped eating as much, stopped sleeping properly, became gaunt, tense, a version of myself molded by the constant scrutiny of this manifestation. Friends stopped visiting, thinking I had lost touch with reality, but I couldn't explain her. Even if I tried, they would never understand. She wasn't a person. She was every hidden atrocity, every overlooked consequence, every tiny act of selfishness I had refused to confront. Sometimes she mirrored me, copying expressions I had long forgotten, echoing gestures I didn't realize were mine. It was terrifying and oddly intimate that the universe had made my guilt tangible so that I could no longer deny it. Every step I took, she followed, not physically like a stalker, but in the essence of my life. Every decision, every choice, every memory I repressed was hers as much as it was mine. Months passed, and I realized I had entered a new kind of relationship. One built not on affection or desire, but on relentless truth. She wasn't going away, she couldn't. She existed to make me confess endlessly, to face the hidden scars I had buried under layers of denial. The apartment became quieter, emptier, but alive with her presence. The bar where we first met felt like a memory, a projection of a lie I had told myself about the beginning of this story. She had always been there, waiting to confront me, to force the narrative I had avoided my entire life. In the end, it isn't about fear or survival. It's about acknowledgement. I walk through my days with the weight of her presence, the intimate knowledge she carries, the reflection of my worst moments always waiting. She reminds me constantly that actions have consequences, that guilt never dies, and that confession is a never-ending cycle. I have become aware of everything I tried to forget, and I see now that she will never let me escape because she is me, and I am her, and neither of us can be free without the other acknowledging every hidden truth. I never thought a breakup could feel like stepping off a cliff while still being chained to the rope. I had been dating him for almost a year, and it had slowly slipped from fun and light into obsessive and suffocating. He knew everything about me, or at least he thought he did. He monitored my social media and remembered every word I ever said, every date, every joke. It started small, almost flattering, but it became unbearable. Every time I tried to leave, he would act wounded, hysterical, apologetic, like a storm that refused to pass. Finally, one night, after a fight that felt endless, I told him it was over. I felt like I had ripped a limb off, but I had to do it. That night, I barely slept. My apartment felt heavier than usual, the shadows thicker, the silence louder. I kept checking the locks on the door, the windows, the deadbolt I had installed a month ago. I was careful, hyper aware of every sound, every footstep in the hallway outside. And yet, when morning came, I didn't expect what I saw. I woke up to the sunlight filtering through the blinds, warm and normal, except that nothing about the apartment felt normal anymore. On the couch across from my bed, sitting perfectly upright, was a man. He was smiling. He had my ex's exact face. Same crooked grin, same green eyes, same messy brown hair falling into his forehead. It was him, but not quite. The way he moved, the way he breathed, there was something almost polite about him, precise in a way my ex never had been. It was terrifying. My heart was pounding so fast it hurt, and my first thought was that I was dreaming. It had to be a dream. But the sunlight, the quiet hum of the fridge, the stack of books I had left on the floor, they were all real. I realized slowly, in a cold, creeping wave of panic, that he wasn't wearing my ex's body. He was wearing his face. He had his face, perfectly replicated, perfectly laid over someone else. I could feel it. Some subtle wrongness in the way the skin around the eyes didn't wrinkle quite the same, the way the lips moved too smoothly, too deliberately. And yet, when he spoke, his voice, the tone, the rhythm, it was different. Softer, patient, controlled. The manic energy of my ex was gone. And that was worse, because he was still here, still present, still merely inches away, but somehow better. I tried to move, to stand, but my body wouldn't respond properly at first. Panic had taken over. My breathing became shallow fast. He didn't approach, didn't move. He just watched, his smile steady, unnervingly calm. It was like he had practiced this, like he knew exactly how to inhabit my apartment, my morning, my space. My first instinct was to scream, but my voice stuck in my throat. Over the next few minutes, or maybe hours, time felt wrong. He started arranging things. The coffee table, the magazines, the blanket tossed over the couch. Little touches, tiny, domestic things that were meant to feel familiar, meant to feel comforting. He was trying to be perfect, and I realized in a panic that he was trying to be my ex, but without all the flaws, without all the chaos, without the obsession. He had learned what I wanted in a partner, learned what I feared, learned what pushed me away, and now he was trying to be the improved version, the one I might actually choose if he hadn't already broken me in subtle, relentless ways. I tried to leave the apartment, to run, but the door didn't open. The lock was jammed, and when I looked back, he was standing at the window, perfectly still, watching me. I didn't understand. I didn't understand how he was here, how this was even possible, or how he had managed to borrow my ex's face, take the body of someone else, to imitate him so precisely. The fear I felt was nothing compared to the surreal horror of realizing that he wasn't just obsessed with me anymore. He had become my expectations, my memory of him, refined and terrifyingly patient. I spent the day watching him, trying to figure out what was real. He moved around the apartment, cooked, cleaned, read, did everything in a way that mimicked a normal morning. Sometimes he paused to look at me, and I felt like my entire existence had been reduced to a test, a calculation, a variable in some equation I couldn't comprehend. The more I looked, the more I realized that the things that had driven me crazy about my ex were gone. He was calm. He was considerate. He was quiet when I needed quiet. He smiled at the right moments, laughed softly, never complained, never demanded. The perfect partner, but entirely wrong, entirely terrifying. By evening, I had none of his other details. The way his hands moved when he touched objects, the unnatural smoothness of the skin, the fact that he didn't seem to blink the same way a normal human would. He was learning, adapting, taking cues, copying behaviors, but underneath it, I felt the rawness. I tried to tell myself it was my imagination, but the small, almost imperceptible moments kept building. How he lingered at the edge of my vision, the slight delay when he responded to my movements, the absence of real emotion behind the imitation. He wasn't alive in the way people are alive. He was an actor, a parasite, an entity that had stolen my ex's face to take a perfected version of him into my life. That night, I couldn't sleep. I stayed on the couch, watching him in the living room from the corner of my eye, trying to make sense of what was happening. He moved silently, never interrupting, always within sight, always mimicking the smallest habits of my ex. Every laugh, every gesture, every tilt of the head was calibrated, measured, designed to unsettle and seduce at the same time. He was learning. He was improving. He was waiting for me to accept him. I realized then, in a wave of icy horror, that the danger wasn't that he would harm me in the conventional sense. The danger was that he could replace my ex entirely, that he could overwrite my memory and my sense of safety, and that in some twisted way he could make me want him. Because unlike my ex, this version had no anger, no obsession, no volatility. He was designed to be loved, designed to be kept. And the thought of that, of waking up tomorrow to another day with this imitation, another day of terrifying perfection, made my stomach churn and my chest tighten. Over the next week, he became more active. He prepared meals, arranged the apartment exactly as I liked it, anticipated my moods, mimicked my ex's quirks while eliminating his flaws. He even started leaving notes, small handwritten reminders that mirrored the ones my ex had once left, only sweeter, only more calculated. It was unbearable. I wanted him gone, but I also found myself watching him, noticing the little ways he was better than the man I had left, the ways he anticipated my needs, the way he filled the apartment with an eerie but comforting presence. I tried calling friends for help, but he was always present in the background, always listening, always learning. I left messages, but no one responded properly. They didn't see him. They didn't see what I saw. And that was the cruelest part, the isolation, the creeping certainty that this wasn't something I could escape from by leaving, by moving, by telling someone. He existed in the spaces my mind couldn't control, in the spaces my memory had opened up to him. And now he had the face I knew, the body I recognized, the habits I remembered, but perfected into something I could neither love nor destroy. Days turned into nights, nights into endless repetition. He was always there, watching, adjusting, becoming the version of my ex that I would have wanted if I had never been scared, never hurt, never realized how obsessive he could be. But now the perfection was worse. It was unnatural. It was impossible. The thing that should have been my choice, my freedom, my closure, had been replaced with this living, breathing nightmare that wore his face, but acted as the better version. And no matter what I did, no matter how far I moved, no matter how much I screamed in my head, he remained. He would remain. And that's when I understood the final truth. Breaking up had never been enough. Leaving him had never been enough. He didn't need me to stay. He only needed to exist in the shape of what I wanted him to be. And now I was engaged, trapped in a living nightmare with a man wearing my ex's face, a man behaving perfectly, a man who would never hurt me, but could never truly be human. I thought it was just a casual thing at first. She seemed normal, funny, easy to talk to, the kind of person who could make a quiet night feel like an adventure. We met on one of those dating apps, and she had this energy that was addictive in a way I couldn't explain. After a few messages and a coffee date that went longer than it should have, she suggested visiting her childhood home. She made it sound nostalgic, sentimental, like something sweet we could do together. I agreed, not thinking twice. The drive there was long, longer than I expected, winding through roads that were barely more than dirt paths, flanked by tall, dense trees that pressed against the car windows like they wanted to watch. She was quiet, humming softly to herself, but there was a weird intensity in her eyes. She kept glancing at me, not in a nervous or shy way, but like she was memorizing me, cataloging every detail, every expression. I laughed it off, telling myself I was overthinking. When we finally arrived, the street ended in a dead zone. The house was set back from the road, partially hidden behind overgrown bushes and twisted vines that crawled over the roof and windows. From the outside, it looked abandoned, like no one had lived there in decades. Paint peeled from the siding, the porch sagged, the windows were dusty and cracked. She got out of the car, her steps careful, deliberate, almost reverent, and told me this was where she grew up. The excitement in her voice didn't match the decay around us, and it made my skin crawl a little. I hesitated, telling myself to stay calm, that maybe she just liked creepy old houses. But when she pushed open the door, it creaked like it hadn't been used in years. Inside, it was worse than the outside. Thick layers of dust coated every surface, cobwebs hung from corners like tattered curtains, and the air was heavy, stale, smelling faintly of rot and mildew. The place was dark, even with the afternoon sun cutting through grimy windows. As we walked through the first hallway, she kept moving ahead, exploring rooms, brushing her hand over the wallpaper and old furniture. I followed reluctantly, my instincts telling me something was off. Then I saw it. A figure. At first I thought it was her reflection in a mirror, but it wasn't. It was a mannequin, posed sitting on the stairs exactly like I had sat at lunch earlier that week, one leg bent, arms resting casually. I froze, staring. It was dressed in clothes like mine, the ones I wore today, down to the scuffed shoes. A small note dangled from its wrist. Next time, stay longer. My stomach dropped. I laughed nervously, telling myself it was some kind of twisted art installation or joke. But as we moved into the next room, there was another one. Another mannequin, posed as if leaning over a chair, holding a coffee cup, the expression frozen but eerily accurate. And another note. Same handwriting, same ominous phrasing. Next time, stay longer. I started to panic. She seemed calm, like she didn't notice anything unusual, or maybe she did, and it didn't scare her. The house went on, room after room, each one worse than the last. Dining room, kitchen, living room, even the bathroom. Mannequins dressed in the exact clothes I had worn over the last few weeks, frozen in positions for moments I could recall vividly, laughing at a joke she had told, tilting my head while thinking, reaching for a cup, sitting on the edge of the bed. Each one had a note. Next time, stay longer. I wanted to leave. I tried to tell her we should go, but she kept walking, guiding me deeper into the house. The air got colder, heavier, and the shadows in the corners seemed to flicker. The mannequins weren't just stag. Their eyes, plastic and painted, somehow followed me. I kept telling myself it was my imagination, but the dread in my chest wouldn't let me believe that. We entered the master bedroom, and the full scale of it hit me. Dozens of mannequins, each posed like me, arranged around the room in ways that mirrored our date today. Some were sitting on the bed, others crouched near the window, some leaning over the dresser. Each one had the note. The handwriting was perfect, consistent, obsessive. Next time, stay longer. My heart pounded in my chest, sweat pouring down my back. She turned to me, smiling softly, and I realized she was recording my reaction. Like she had planned this, like every step I had taken was part of the design. I wanted to scream, to run, but my legs felt like they had turned to lead. I noticed something else. Some of the mannequins weren't exact replicas of me. Some had tiny differences, subtle variations, like shadows of me in alternate moments. One had a hand slightly raised, like it was reaching for me. Another's head tilted in a way I never had. I understood then that it wasn't just me being copied. It was my memory, my actions, frozen and multiplied. The house had been waiting, collecting, preparing. She had been building this collection long before me, long before today. She moved closer, calm, deliberate, almost tender, her fingers brushing against one of the mannequins. I couldn't tear my eyes away. The realization struck me in waves of nausea. She wasn't just obsessed with me. She was obsessed with the idea of me, the idea of dates, moments, interactions. She was recreating them, trapping them, and the notes were a promise and a threat. Next time, stay longer. Next time, I wouldn't get away. I tried to leave, my voice caught in my throat, my hands shaking, but the front door wasn't where it had been. It had vanished behind another wall, replaced by more mannequins. I turned around, searching, panic rising like fire, and found myself in the hallway we had first entered, but everything had changed. The walls were lined with hundreds of them now, every pose imaginable, every action repeated, every smile and frown I had made mirrored in stiff plastic form. My mind raced. I couldn't call anyone, couldn't escape. She wasn't hostile. She wasn't violent. But the way she moved, the way she guided me through the house, the way the mannequins were arranged, it was clear. She wanted me to understand that the house belonged to her, that it was a trap designed for me, that the collection of frozen moments wasn't about me physically, but about my memory, my presence, my life reduced to a series of poses. Next time, I might not get to leave at all. I spent hours in there trapped, following her through endless rooms, watching myself multiplied endlessly. Each note was a reminder, a command, a statement of control. Next time, stay longer. My fear turned to exhaustion, then to a sick, creeping fascination. I wanted to see how far it went, how many moments had been captured, how many versions of me existed, each one frozen in time. It was terrifying, but I couldn't look away. By the time the sun dipped below the horizon, I realized the house wasn't just abandoned. It lived, breathed, and waited. It had been waiting for me, and now that it had me, it would never let go. The woman beside me, serene, calm, almost motherly in her devotion to the house and her collection, was a part of it, an extension of the house itself. And I understood fully for the first time that she wasn't going to stop. She would continue collecting, freezing, preserving, waiting for the next moment, the next date, the next version of me. Next time, stay longer. I don't know how long I was in there. Hours, days, weeks, it all blended together. The mannequins multiplied. My sense of reality dissolved. The house seemed infinite, stretching beyond logic, each room filled with versions of me, each note a whisper of inevitability. The woman led me through corridors I didn't remember, rooms I hadn't seen, always calm, always waiting. I stopped trying to run. I stopped trying to speak. I understood that the only way out was to do exactly what the notes demanded, to stay longer, to let the collection grow, to become part of the house. And somewhere deep in the back of my mind, a horrifying thought emerged. If I left, if I refused, what would happen next? Another version of me would appear, waiting for the next date, another collection, another note. Next time, stay longer.